The woman is accustomed to using her beauty and acting talent as a weapon, turning them into a source of profit and personal victories. She seemed obsessed with collecting awards, thirsting for recognition, and unable to stop in her mad pursuit of fame. She was often told that she was incredibly beautiful, and this nickname became her calling card and part of her image. Movie star Alina, surrounded by attention and luxury, suddenly found herself in a strange and incomprehensible place, far from the familiar world. The cold made her shiver, and it was then that, unable to bear it any longer, Alina opened her eyes, trying to understand what had happened to her. She saw a huge mountain in front of her, unable to comprehend its nature, as if this vision was implausible. Everything around looked absurd, because she didn't understand why such a mountain stood in the forest, and how it ended up there at all. Just 2 hours ago, she was on a film set where she could ask for a stunt double for dangerous scenes. Alina stubbornly convinced herself that she had to try hard if she wanted to receive a prestigious award this year too. Nadezhda warned her that strange things were happening and the missing people were never found. But filming began anyway. Serious safety measures were put in place there, and several tests were conducted on dummies, demonstrating the reliability of the conditions. It looked scary, but if the rules were followed, it was safe unless an unforeseen incident occurred. This is exactly the incident that occurred when Alina fell and flew down a dangerous cliff. She fell straight into the ocean, but now there was a dense forest around her, which confused her even more. She felt like the filming was taking place in the summer, so it was strange to find herself in a place with such harsh and cold weather. Gradually, Alina decided that perhaps these were some kind of hidden cameras and that it was just a prank going on. However, common sense dictated that no one would film in such dangerous conditions without preparation. She thought that everything that was happening could be just an illusion caused by the shock after a strong blow. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared before her eyes, seeming incredibly real to her. The creature didn't hesitate and rushed towards Alina. Its movements were fast and threatening, as if death itself was rushing towards her. At first, it seemed to the girl that all this was just an illusion, a game of her mind, tired of fear and tension. But the monster continued to approach faster and faster and had already begun to attack, not giving her a second to think or try to escape. Alina's heart was pounding so hard that she felt like it would burst out. She didn't understand what or who she had collided with. The monster jumped at her again and again, trying to reach her with its claws, as if it had no intention of stopping. Suddenly, a bright flash pierced the darkness, so powerful that the darkness scattered around as if it had never been there. The monster began to bleed thickly, because the enemy, invisible to her, had already dealt a fatal blow and stopped the attack. A tall blonde man in a fur coat appeared in front of Alina's figure, as if he had appeared out of thin air. The girl decided that there was a man in front of her, but there was something frightening in his actions and heavy steps towards her. Alina's legs seemed to be rooted to the ground, numb with fear, and she could not move to escape. The man addressed her in a strange language that sounded alien and completely incomprehensible. She tried to say something in response, but her words were just as unclear to him. The man did not stop talking, continuing to address her, and Alina was at a loss, not knowing what to do. It seemed to her that the problem was not in her, but in the language. And suddenly the season itself changed around her. Even the monster that attacked her looked so strange, as if it were part of a ridiculous dream. Everything indicated that the girl found herself in another world, far from familiar reality. But there is no way to verify this, since such movements have always been considered a fairy tale and fantasy. Something like this could only be found on the pages of novels or in manhwa, but not in the destinies of living people existing in reality. In books, the heroes often quickly began to understand a foreign language, as if it had always been familiar to them, as if their memory was being opened anew. The man extended his hand and Alina looked at him anxiously, not knowing whether to trust him or whether it was better to keep her distance from the stranger. Reason told me that now was the right time to accept the help extended, even if my heart was constricted with fear and uncertainty about what was happening. Gathering her courage, she carefully placed her hand in his, feeling the trembling and tension slowly building inside her. At that very moment, a golden bracelet appeared on her wrist, softly glowing as if absorbing the breath of a new world. Alina had absolutely no idea what this sign meant. She was overcome with confusion, bewilderment, and slight panic. The man noticed that the bracelet had begun to work, but the translation was still fragmentary and did not provide a clear picture of what was happening. He demanded that she pull herself together and not get distracted, and Alina agreed because she had no other choice. He assured me that the bracelet was working properly and there was no point in wasting energy on unnecessary words. Everything would come with time. The girl decided that the device in this world acts as a translator, helping to understand someone else's speech. Then she asked who she was to him and where exactly she ended up, because the answer tormented her heart. The man responded with a counter-question, asking whether the name of the place would help her to understand anything, and understand what was happening. Alina admitted that she was unlikely to figure it out, but inside she still felt a burning curiosity. He said that it was up to her to decide who she would become. There would be no other answer. These words sounded unexpectedly wise, and Alina smiled slightly, agreeing with his thought. Now she clearly understood that she had been transported to a strange and completely different world, unlike the previous one. The man didn't show surprise or shock, as if he saw this every day and was used to it. For him, such cases seemed normal, like a part of life that he did not consider strange. She still asked if he had met other people who had ended up in this world by accident. He admitted that he usually only found their remains, but this was the first time he had seen a living girl. Then Alina understood why he spoke so calmly and coolly without looking up from his work. She was left alone with her thoughts while the man methodically and calmly cleaned his sword. Alina didn't know who he really was, but she decided to stay close for her own safety. Pulling herself together, she slowly stood up and walked closer to the man, overcoming her fear. She assumed he was a warrior or a knight, accustomed to fighting monsters and death. But his cold smile only caused her intense fear and internal trembling. He really fit the image of a stern and ruthless Duke of the North. The Duke of the North always had a stern face in which there was no room for kindness. His gaze seemed to burn with cold, and one blow could throw the monster aside. The gentleman gave his name, Andre, ruler of Lenbird, Duke of the Northern lands of Icklin. Alina was truly surprised because he really turned out to be that very Duke of the North. She gave her name and noted with slight embarrassment that she was pleased to meet you. Alina's real name was known to few, but abroad she introduced herself differently. And it was this name that she used in official and social circles. The Duke of the North noticed her hand and asked what was wrong with it, to which Alina explained that it was a special greeting common in her home. The girl was surprised to realize that she would have to explain the intricacies of her etiquette, and began to understand that the rules here could be very different from what she was used to. He carefully took her hand, and Alina felt a slight surprise when she felt him lean his face towards her palm, displaying unexpected gallantry. The Duke simply kissed her hand without adding any words, and this simple action immediately caused confusion and bewilderment in Alina. Because of this unexpected gesture, Alina felt a surge of embarrassment, not knowing how to react to such unusual attention from a man. She had not expected at all that the Duke would act exactly like that, because her thoughts were about a simple handshake. But then something much more intimate and unusual happened. Afterwards, he smiled and greeted her, noting her status as a foreigner, which simultaneously added a slight touch of playfulness and interest to the situation. Alina tried to comprehend what was happening. The Duke had just kissed the back of her hand, and it seemed completely unbelievable and even unreal to her. She had only seen this kind of thing before on film sets or at official awards ceremonies. But here the Duke of the North, accustomed to sports and balls, showed unusual gallantry himself. He noted that Alina looked simple, like a commoner, but behaved with the dignity of a lady, to which the girl explained that in her native land there was no division into nobility and common people. Everyone was equal. The Duke made a remark that if she were an aristocrat, perhaps she could be more useful, which made Alina wonder about ulterior motives. She realized that he might be trying to take advantage of the man he had just saved, and this made her a little wary and wonder about his intentions. The girl decided to carefully clarify whether this meant that she was useless if she did not belong to the nobility, and he replied that everything depended on her skills and abilities. Alina asked what would happen if she couldn't be of any use at all, feeling a little nervous and anxious about her future with the Duke. The Duke explained that in that case, some way would be found to give her a use without leaving the girl without attention or something to do. If Alina wanted to leave this mountain alive, the odds were simple and brutal. Every step required precise calculation, otherwise death was inevitable. She understood that her chances depended on how convincingly she could prove her worth to him. She began to tell me that her skills and knowledge could be useful in this world, that she could do a lot of things that could be useful if she was trusted with life and a role among the people who surrounded her. Alina added that her existence had always been a light and salt for those who knew her. Her actions brought joy and inspiration, and she wanted to transfer that influence here to a new land where everything was foreign. She was convinced that it would be important here too, and she declared that she was ready to sacrifice everything in order to become necessary, to prove that her presence was worthwhile, even if she had to give up a lot. He listened to her and said that if she wanted to survive in these conditions, if she really intended to live, she would have to give something real and valuable in exchange for this opportunity. He emphasized that her arrival seemed primitive to him, that no one was yet convinced of her abilities, and only real actions could confirm her importance and necessity in this world. Alina decided to argue, and declared that she was capable of contributing to the development of culture and art, demonstrating skills that could be useful, to prove that she was not just an alien, but a valuable participant. It might be hard to appreciate at first, not immediately noticeable, but the experience and skill she brought with her could change people's minds about her significance if she could demonstrate it. In her home world, she was a renowned actress, known to everyone. Her ability to move her body and express emotions was mesmerizing, and every step she took on stage was perceived as art, especially in acting. He suggested that she demonstrate her skills right now to verify her talent and assess how capable she was of applying her skills in new conditions. Alina was frightened by this request, but he reassured her, saying that she just needed to start by sitting on a tree and showing off her abilities, without demanding perfect performance. She doubted whether it was necessary to do it right there, but he saw nothing strange in it and insisted that she begin without delay, right where she stood. She then asked who exactly she should play, trying to figure out how best to showcase her skills and what emotions to show to convince him of her worth. He said it didn't matter who exactly she played. What was more important was the demonstration of skill itself, her ability to convey emotion and create an impression that would convince him. He finally clarified that it would be best to play a villain, to test her ability to own a role and improvise, to control the stage and attention, showing the character's personality. Suddenly, the golden sparks seemed to mean she had to improvise. use all her skill and creative courage to convince him of her unique value. Alina nevertheless decided to take on this test, realizing that an attempt was the only chance to survive, and that courage and determination could save her where weakness would lead to defeat. She knew it was worth a try. It was still better than just waiting to die. And every step she took up that tree was a chance to prove that her skills were important and valuable. Suddenly, she found herself close to him, feeling the tension and the risk, but at the same time understanding that this was the only way to show her skill, confidence, and courage, which he was testing. He was frightened by this approach because he had not expected such determination, and she pressed her face against him, showing all the courage and skill that she hid within herself, ready to prove that she was capable of survival. She tried to understand who stood before her. What kind of man could command her so directly? It seemed to her that he expected complete submission, as if she would obey him because he had once saved her. He seems to be convinced that his status as the Northern Duke automatically gives him full right to power, and that the whole world should obey only him, especially her. It seemed to her that sometimes it was not worth jumping to conclusions prematurely, whispering guesses under your breath and inventing entire scenarios in your head. This only confused your thoughts. At the same time, she skillfully watched him, trying to understand whether he would accept the game or whether his irritation would lead to cruelty and perhaps even a threat to his life. Suddenly he smiled and his face looked a little softer, as if confirming that her observations were indeed close to the truth and that he saw her as a challenge. After this, he stated that if everything went well, after her signature number there would be a funeral one, as if it were part of some kind of game or test. She wondered why he was talking to himself, since he had a person in front of him with whom he could discuss events directly, rather than engage in an internal monologue. The thought flashed through her head that perhaps she had gone too far and guessed his intentions too deeply or invaded his personal space. He explained that it was a kind of protection, and surprisingly she liked it, because now she understood that she could keep the situation under control. He added that if she could act like a worthy opponent, it would be perfect for the role he wanted her to play, and that added to her confidence. Alina was surprised and couldn't hide her curiosity. She wondered what else he was going to make her do, what trials lay ahead. He told her that she would have to enter high society by pretending to be his mistress, and added to this was the threat of death, which made the role especially dangerous. He explained that the threats to life were real, like a test of loyalty and courage, and that completing the task required complete determination. If she refuses, he will never take her with him, and then she will have to remain alone in the forest without protection and a chance of salvation. She was surprised by the strange circumstance. Why did he choose her and not someone else? And what exactly did the Duke notice in her to entrust her with such a role? Entering high society at the risk of one's life could involve politics, intrigue, and complex influence schemes, in which every mistake could be costly. The fact that he entrusted such a task to a random woman meant that there was no one around whom he could trust, and that only she was capable of handling this mission. So she nodded and said she understood, and at the same time asked what she would get in return for such risk and responsibility. He thought for a moment and calmly replied that the main reward was life itself, the preservation of which would depend on her actions and devotion. And this sounded serious. The girl apologized, noting that her life already belonged to him, but he said that if he did not save her now, she would soon lose it, and this increased the tension of the situation. Alina reasoned that even under these conditions, this work would not be a mere formality. It was essentially a life-or-death experience, and she would find it difficult to find the motivation to participate. He saw that if he was entrusting this to her, it meant that there were no other suitable candidates who could handle the task with the same skill and dignity. She noted that they would be involved in high society for a long time, guarding its secrets, which would make her role both dangerous and significant. He had to give her something in return so that she would have at least some material and social support necessary for survival in this new world. He confirmed this by saying that as his mistress, she would live in the castle, receive an allowance, and have a stable position, which made the deal more acceptable. He gave Alina hope, promising that she would have a chance to return to her native places, where her life remained before all the disasters that happened to her. Alina couldn't comprehend what she had heard and tried to understand whether it was really possible for her to return to the lands where her family and friends lived. He explained that there was no certainty, but there was a way. The difficulty was that we were talking about a country full of dangerous monsters where few dared to go. Stories of returning to this country were rare, except from the Great Wizard with the BTI. If she showed courage in her work, risking her life, he would personally escort her there. But how to guarantee success if she is no longer quite human, and he himself is not a great wizard? There was no answer to this question. Now it was only a hope, but even a small chance became a powerful motivation for Alina, igniting in her the desire to act. All the novels she had read before ended with the characters settling in a new place without returning to the past, and this made her anxious. She thought that there really was a way to return to where her family, friends, and everything dear to her that she had lost remained. Alina's memories again brought back images of her former life and work, moments that seemed so important and unique. She firmly decided that she would take this world back, that she would definitely return home, to the place that would forever remain a part of her heart. Alina said that she would do everything in her power to not miss a single chance and not let down those who believe in her. He suggested returning to the castle to continue the conversation and discuss next steps. allowing Alina to think about what she had heard. Everyone was amazed to see the gentleman accompanying the girl as if she were too weak to walk on her own. They greeted him and asked if he had sustained any injuries during the recent events. The gentleman explained that he had been absent since the morning because he had found Alina and was ensuring her safety, protecting her from possible monster attacks. He was late for the meeting because he was spending time accompanying and taking care of her, which was unexpected for everyone. The servants were perplexed as to how this girl could have ended up in a forest full of dangers, and were shocked by what they saw. The man approached the gentleman and said that Alina must be having a hard time, and he wanted to help ease her condition. But the gentleman firmly replied that he needed help not to ease her difficulties, but so that she could cope on her own. The servants were amazed that his lordship stuttered, something they had never seen before and which caused them doubt and surprise. Alina didn't understand the brazen tone of the conversations, because it seemed like her subordinates could do everything according to the rules without showing such impudence. The master's subordinates began to suspect that he was capable of disrupting all plans right now, and this created a tense atmosphere in the hall. Back in the forest, Alina asked the Duke to wait a minute before returning to the castle, as they needed to think through all the details of their upcoming actions. She didn't understand why she had to play the role of mistress, but she decided to accept the circumstances, and the Duke asked what was required of him in this situation. Alina explained that sometimes a woman suddenly appears in the Duke's life and just as unexpectedly becomes his lover, as if fate itself had decreed it so. She noted that the Duke needed a certain backstory that would explain the reasons for her appearance and their joint actions. The Duke noted that unexpected details could create complications and even lead to unforeseen problems in their plan. The simplest explanation, in her opinion, was that he had saved her, and that this had immediately created a special bond between them. He fell in love with the beauty at first sight, and this feeling immediately became strong and real, despite the unusual circumstances. Alina said that she didn't want everything to look forced, but she was willing to accept the situation if the Duke took her in his arms and showed his care. The Duke was slightly embarrassed by such a request, but still decided to pick her up, realizing that this would strengthen their mutual understanding. The girl was delighted, because she understood that the plan was working, and the Duke was meeting her expectations, creating the desired impression. She had no other choice. She could not interfere with his excitement, which was evident in every movement and look of the Duke. This was especially noticeable when his lordship stuttered and froze, experiencing internal tension before her every word or movement. Just a few hours ago, Alina was kneeling before him, demonstrating humility and caution at the same time, awaiting the Duke's reaction. The Duke looked at her very menacingly, and his gaze was so serious that the girl involuntarily felt fear and anxiety at the same time. She felt the tension growing, not knowing how he would react to her behavior and how deep his emotions ran at this moment. The girl begged for mercy, and the Duke admitted that he could not believe that his look, full of emotion, could be perceived so incorrectly. She admitted that she felt like prey, but she only did it to make him smile and ease the tension between them. Alina asked the Duke to smile, and he agreed, but his smile was frighteningly serious and at the same time encouraging, emphasizing his inner strength. It all became clear. The Duke was worried about the possibility of violence, and she felt she had to act carefully to avoid taking things to extremes. Then he thought about actually punishing her, and the girl apologized, assuring him that there would be no more such jokes and the tension would subside. Alina also noted that the Duke ultimately asked her to play the role of the villain in order for everything to look convincing, and for this, it was necessary to create the right atmosphere. She asked how they could convince others if his gaze did not express love, but rather a desire to harm, but realized that it was impossible to change that. The girl declared that she would seduce him, creating the illusion of passion and at the same time helping the Duke maintain control over what was happening. The Duke was very surprised by her words because Alina did not mean real temptation, but only help in playing the role, so that the game would look authentic. She explained that they could pretend that she had come specifically to seduce him, and this would make their plan more convincing to those around them. From that moment on, the Duke remembered that his consent only strengthened the situation, and now it seems that everything he accepted makes the story even more plausible. Alina added that all of this is more real than his sudden love at first sight, because her actions have consequences and create emotional credibility. The Duke realized there was nothing more to add, and once he had grasped it, she suggested building the backstory step by step, showing emotion through actions rather than words. He didn't know what to do, and she calmly explained that he should agree with everything she said, especially when other people were around, because it created the impression of complete support. She added that it didn't matter how strange or crazy her proposals were, and he, still doubtful, asked how far her madness could go. Then she said that love itself was madness, and he seemed not to understand at all what she was talking about, and she winked at him with a slight mockery, adding to the mystery. She said that lovers give flowers, make gifts, and are ready to give everything they have for the sake of their feelings, expecting nothing in return except sincerity and reciprocity. This is what it means to love. She tried to explain with commas and words, and then asked him if he had ever experienced a similar feeling in order to understand his inner world. She noted that, apparently, he had never fallen in love, and this was due to his character, because people would believe in his love only when he did something unusual and crazy. She explained that she understood his caution and difficult character, and therefore suggested that they act together. She speaks for both, but he also needs to show at least a little passion for their feelings to look genuine. He asked what exactly he should say and suggested that it would be enough to admit that she was his woman, and that would already create the impression of a serious relationship. But she noticed that others might perceive it differently, as if she belonged entirely to him. And this created the wrong impression about her role next to him. She said that if it was him, she didn't mind, but perhaps it would be better to put it this way. He just didn't want to give her to someone else, rather than emphasizing ownership. After this, she admitted that she knows a phrase that can convince anyone, and it can be easily used to influence people and create the desired impression. And this phrase was extremely simple, specially chosen for him so that he could easily apply it without unnecessary effort and doubt. Now, after some time, she did not understand at all why he could not say these words, because everything seemed so simple and obvious from her point of view. She was amazed that his serious expression remained completely unreadable, no matter how many times they tried to rehearse the situation together and explain the nuances to her. He remarked that since she was so confident in herself as an actress, she probably understood better than he did the reason why everything was going wrong, and admitted that he was too stubborn to follow her advice. She agreed with this and suggested starting over from the very beginning, to go through the entire process again and correct the mistakes that were preventing us from achieving the desired result. She tried to help him prepare by rehearsing the situation and explaining exactly what he needed to say to appear convincing and complete the situation successfully. Then the man tried to discern what they were whispering to each other, but the words were barely audible, and their tension attracted his attention, as if the secret could change everything around. The guard approached the gentleman, trying to understand the essence of his words, and carefully watched his reaction, trying to grasp what exactly he was going to do in the next few minutes. The gentleman walked slowly down the corridor, trying to say something, but his thoughts were interspersed with his actions, and every movement seemed calculated, as if he was preparing for an important step. Alina watched him with hope, believing that he would succeed, and her heart calmed slightly, seeing the determination in his gaze and the confidence in every gesture. All he had to do was utter a few words that could change the situation, and everything depended on how accurately he could convey his thoughts and intentions. He finally declared that he would carry her himself, and this news shocked everyone, because no one expected such determination and courage from the gentleman at that moment. They couldn't believe their ears when the gentleman said they were coming back for her, and added that everyone should get ready, as if the plan had been carefully thought out in advance. The guards were completely perplexed, not understanding what exactly was happening and how they should act when faced with the master's unexpected decision. No one could imagine that his lordship could be attacked by a monster, and the thought of possible danger filled the air with anxiety and tension. Everything was so amazing and unusual that Alina decided that the gentleman had made every effort to make everything work out, and this inspired respect and slight admiration in her. She lay there, slightly embarrassed, and lowered her eyes, trying to cope with the excitement that had overcome her at the sight of her master's decisive actions. He asked her to be quiet, and this request made Alina even more embarrassed because she did not expect to react so emotionally. Still, she decided to comply with his request, turning away and keeping her thoughts to herself so as not to disturb the peace of the moment. He couldn't understand her reaction, and she explained that she would simply try to behave as well, trying to match his determination and behavior. After a while, they leisurely walked through the castle, examining the interiors and catching every detail that could tell about its grandeur and order. The servants greeted the master and informed him that dinner was ready, demonstrating restrained respect and a willingness to carry out all his orders without asking unnecessary questions. The gentleman noted that it was also necessary to prepare dinner for his guests, showing care and attention to everyone present in the castle, as if he had thought through everything down to the smallest detail. Alina noticed that nothing had been done yet, and admitted that she was already feeling tired, while noting that the Duke turned out to be much more generous than she expected, and this earned her respect. The castle was astonishingly large, and she remarked on the impressive scale of the rooms, and the gentleman also remarked how amazed he was that she was so impressed and paid attention to detail. Alina noted that every detail was important and required careful preparation. She suggested they finalize the plans, and he agreed, understanding her point. She sat down on the sofa with a professional posture and expressed her desire to understand why she should be his beloved villain, striving to get to the bottom of the truth. The Duke explained that his supposed bride had died and was rumored to be a villain, but he considered these rumors to be trivial and did not attach any importance to them, seeing everything differently. He noted that condolences were not needed. He was simply outraged that someone dared to interfere with him choosing a spouse according to his own discretion and taste. She clarified whether his choice did not mean love or that it was almost a formality, a marriage for the sake of circumstances, and tried to understand the Duke's real motives. He added that he does not perceive the nickname Northern Duke as a compliment, but rather as a designation of his position, power, and influence, rather than beauty or charm. She was surprised and noted that his appearance was truly impressive. His demeanor and external attractiveness did not leave anyone indifferent. However, that didn't seem important now. Alina inquired about how his fiancé had died, trying to understand the mysterious circumstances of the tragedy. He explained that people had previously cared little about this place. It was located far from the center of the kingdom, and prosperity came gradually until gold mining began here. After the mines opened, there were many offers for positions, and he chose the quietest and most insignificant defensive position so as not to attract unnecessary attention. The bride died the night before the engagement right in his estate, which was a real shock and called into question the safety even within the closed walls of the duchy. This became a challenge for the Lenberg duchy. It was outrageous that a murder could be committed calmly inside the estate, violating all notions of security. The Duke emphasized that this was a warning. The future wife must be worthy to withstand the trials and meet the high demands of the family and position. He explained that most people considered it a suicide, but the depth of the situation was too complex to be perceived as a simple event, requiring special attention. Alina was shocked by his confidence. The Duke showed her with his gaze that he was handling the situation and understood its depth without doubting his actions. He noted that few people were capable of such actions, had never held anything more dangerous than a kitchen knife. The investigation was completed, and the defense unit refused to intervene. Therefore, he considered it necessary to conduct an independent investigation, which required a person who could fit organically into society. Just at that moment, a servant entered and asked for permission. Of course, he had servants for all household needs, but Alina forgot about them, which became a problem, because her clothes were from another world and there were no suitable ones in the house. Perhaps the only thing left to do was to wrap myself in my cloak again, but the Duke advised that it would be better to go and undress in the bathroom to tidy myself up and prepare for the events. He warned her that she might be noticed while changing and suggested that she simply walk through dressed, ignoring the curious glances. Alina noted that in any case, her outfit will immediately catch the eye, as its uniqueness and style clearly stand out from the usual surroundings. The Duchess then said she had an idea and warned that what was happening might seem strange, but it was part of her plan and preparation. He assured her that everything was fine and she could act as she wished, and she added that she would now show what real acting was. The servant stood there perplexed, not understanding why no one was answering the door, and tried to find a logical explanation for what was happening. Alina turned to his lordship again and he turned to the deer, and she told him not to worry and to calmly observe everything that was happening. She understood that performing a performance with an audience would be difficult, and she was afraid that no one would be able to fully grasp the essence of her actions. The Duchess asked him to speak, and she used her stomach to make his voice clearly audible even behind the door, enhancing the effect of presence. For her, this was a trifle, because Alina was a world-class actress, accustomed to coping with any difficulties and surprising those around her. She briefly explained that she did not want the servants to touch the Duke, considering it an invasion of personal space and part of her plan. The maids were shocked when they heard her scream, forbidding anyone to touch the Duke's body, not understanding the essence of what was happening. They also couldn't understand what exactly was going on behind the door, and why the Duchess was so tightly controlling the situation. Alina understood their confusion, but insisted that they were obliged to play along and behave as her production required. She opened the door and gave the order for the servants to return to work, leaving her and the Duke alone, demonstrating sternness and confidence. The Duke himself confirmed that they did not need servants and ordered them to leave the room to maintain privacy and concentration. After this, the servants immediately left the room, and the Duke was left alone with Alina, creating an atmosphere of complete control and trust. When everyone left, she was still nervous, but she understood that this was an important part of the job, and her actions were recognized as excellent and successful. The Duke expressed satisfaction, noting that he too was pleased with what was happening and appreciated her professionalism and confidence. After this, she announced that now one could enjoy taking a bath and specified where exactly the bathroom for relaxation was located. He pointed in the direction, and Alina was finally able to catch her breath, thinking about how to get rid of the unusual clothes, without yet having come up with a final solution. As she approached the bathtub, she was finally able to breathe freely, feeling relieved and able to relax after the tense moments. She froze in her tracks when she saw the bathtub, with 2 robes standing next to it, adding to the feeling of comfort and readiness to rest after all the experiences. She had another interesting idea in mind, so she wanted him to come closer, watching her every move with a slight smile. Alina, Duke of the North, wore a light robe that barely covered her figure, leaving room for play and anticipation that hung in the air. After this, she asked him to rip her clothes, as if testing his resolve in reaction to the bold proposal she had just made. She didn't understand why he wasn't doing anything yet, so she moved closer, feeling a little nervous about his confusion and her own initiative. It was very cute. He turned away because almost everything was left in her robe, and he was embarrassed, but the tension gave the scene a special charm. She said he could handle it. It was like tearing paper, and that encouraged him, and he quickly began to tear her clothes, trying to follow her hints. But she soon noticed that he was not doing it as easily as he seemed, and asked if it was really so difficult for him to do, watching his efforts. Then he quickly pulled her close and closed her mouth, as if warning her that the danger might be closer than she thought, and that she needed to act carefully. She asked what he was doing, and he replied that someone was eavesdropping on them, creating an atmosphere of unexpected tension and slight fear about what was happening. She thought it might be a spy or an assassin, and he confirmed her suspicions, remaining calm as if he encountered this often and was no longer surprised. He debated whether to kill them or spare them, but the lady insisted that it was not worth killing, demonstrating common sense and concern to avoid unnecessary violence. He looked crazy, and it was unpleasant to think that someone could die. so she asked him to act differently so that the situation would not turn into a tragedy. She suggested that instead of killing them, they could use them here and now, creating a plausible situation to deceive them, which turned out to be more reasonable than cruelty. Even if they could only hear their actions, it would take real acting to make them believable, and he admitted he was far from a professional at that. He asked if they should really do something, and she didn't understand why the conversation had suddenly gone in that direction, surprised by his unexpected seriousness. So she pushed him away and said that she had not expected such indecent behavior, feeling a slight anger mixed with the excitement and thrill of the situation. He asked what she was talking about and what she was going to do, not hiding his surprise and slight concern at her bold actions. She said she would play herself, and all he had to do was watch and clap, although he still had to rip her clothes while partially participating in the game. If he could say her name and smile occasionally, it would add interest to the game, but he told her to forget about it, refusing to participate completely. She grabbed his arm and threw him to the floor, then climbed on top, demonstrating confidence and control over what was happening, completely immersing herself in her role. She asked if he had seen her play, and he appeared very embarrassed and frightened, not hiding his confusion at her determination and unexpected initiative. She said that was something to leave to a professional, implying that her skills and courage exceeded his expectations, creating a subtle contrast between the two. After this, Alina began to moan, adding emotional tension to the scene and enhancing the effect of involvement that was felt in every movement. He was throwing her clothes around and was very confused by what was happening right now, feeling both excitement and a little bit of confusion about the situation. He noted that she looked amazing, and no one could understand how she managed to cope with such a shameful scenario, as if all her movements were thought out in advance and fit perfectly into the overall picture of what was happening. Alina acted independently and without any problems, demonstrating confidence because it was impossible to simply tear things up or panic. She knew how to maintain control in any situation. She reminded herself that she was an actress and had to keep a straight face, hoping that the spy had already left the room, leaving behind only a slight tension in the air. The Duke remarked that she probably thought there was nothing more to be heard because her acting was so wild, but that was precisely what caused a slight blush to appear on the faces of those present. Alina anticipated the course of events and suggested hurrying to call the servants while there was still water left, without ending the conversation completely, and wondered if the Duke would be interested in watching what was happening. At the same time, she winked at him coquettishly, assuming that he himself would be curious to see the reaction of the servants and how they would cope with the sudden situation. The Duke watched the living women together in the same room, and it was noticeable that they were clearly busy with something, creating an atmosphere of slight intrigue and tension. The maid couldn't believe her eyes and immediately apologized when she saw that their mistress and another woman were in robes, as if the incident had caught her off guard. She said that she would take Mistress Alina to the bathroom and help her get ready, carefully guiding her every move and reassuring her that everything would go perfectly. After this, she promised to return even nicer and believed that such a reaction from the maid was the ideal result, because everything that happened should have evoked only positive emotions. After a while, Alina was made up and looked neat and attractive, every touch highlighting her natural beauty, giving her confidence for the upcoming events. A gold chain and jewelry completed the look, their value and cultural significance creating the impression that each piece was chosen not by chance, but with special attention to detail. Her clothes were prepared in advance, either at her own request or by the Duke's order, creating a look that was entirely in keeping with the importance of the moment and Alina's role. The maids remarked that the mistress was beautiful, and they fully understood why the lady had chosen this particular dress for today, as it perfectly accentuated her figure and character, making the choice obvious. Alina thought about Andre's mother and wondered if it was normal that, being just a guest, she evoked such memories and emotions, as if the past were closely intertwined with the present. She wondered what to expect next, because he was literally just outside the door, an excitement mixed with curiosity, making her heart beat faster. Alina opened the door and Andre appeared in front of her, his presence instantly changing the atmosphere, filling the room with quiet tension and anticipation. He looked at her carefully, assessing her appearance and wondering whether the chosen image suited her, and whether it emphasized her advantages. He should have noted that she looked stunning, and his words could have confirmed her attractiveness and confidence, but all that was left was to watch her reaction. However, Alina noticed that he only frowned, and this immediately made her wonder what exactly he was feeling and how he assessed her preparation. Alina didn't understand why his reaction was so sharp. He behaved so strangely that she could barely pull herself together, put on a dress, and appear in front of his mother. The maids apologized, explaining that they were only following orders, and he immediately asked whose orders they were, not hiding his displeasure and slight anxiety. He did not give a direct order to be brought immediately, but the expectation of this command hung in the air and made the atmosphere tense. Meanwhile, Alina grabbed him by the tie and pulled him close, not wanting to lose the moment of intimacy that seemed so important to her. She wanted to know if he was going to stop thinking about others when she was in front of him, all her determination shining in her eyes. It had to be taken into account that he was extremely irritated, and one could guess that at this moment someone else in the clothes of past generations of the family only increased his anxiety. But Alina herself did not choose this dress. It came to her without her intervention, and this added to her internal contradiction. She noted that she looked more beautiful in this outfit and understood that she should not let her emotions overwhelm her, because the situation required patience. He could scold her later, but now rest was more important. Alina wondered what the point of decorating herself was if his lordship didn't like it, and she argued with herself. Finally, she asked him to admit that she was beautiful, hoping to hear those words, which meant much more to her than mere praise. The day had been tiring for both parties. The tension had been mounting, and when he finally exhaled and said she was beautiful, it was a real relief. It was difficult for Alina to hear even the slightest praise from Andre. Every word he said was given with effort, and therefore had special value. After this, the maid turned to his lordship, trying to show respect and humility, understanding the importance of the moment and the tension of the situation. She apologized again, showing genuine regret and responsibility for what happened, trying to make amends. She clarified that she had instructed them to choose this dress because it seemed to be the only suitable one, different from the others and appropriate for the occasion. At that moment, he realized whose orders were being carried out, and he realized how little he had previously thought about such details and their significance. He didn't even understand why he hadn't thought of this before. But now everything became clearer, and his thoughts began to fall into order. Alina was afraid to look up and admitted that if she should have chosen a simpler outfit, she apologized for not having thought of it right away. She was very sorry. The girl stood her ground, carefully assessing the woman who introduced her to the gentleman, taking into account Andre's character, realizing that he would not tolerate silence. He said that he might have interfered too much, but he acknowledged her efforts and conscientious maintenance of order in the castle, which earned him respect. He watched the situation through his fingers, despite the fact that she had touched the Duchess's thing without permission, showing tolerance and understanding. The girl boldly tried to explain that she was simply doing her duty, and he, although dissatisfied, saw her sincerity and desire to be useful. Alina couldn't understand why the Duke acted so strangely around her and her parents. He seemed to keep his distance, even though he seemed to be paying attention. He stated that it was too late for her to interfere. She just needed to prepare her husband, and for the rest of the day she could be free without burdening herself with affairs. The son noticed that the maid smiled strangely, as if she knew something that no one else could foresee, and this made him slightly uneasy. Soon dinner was ready, and everything was laid out neatly, as it should be for a gala evening, with attention to every detail of the table setting. Alina tried to feed Andre carefully, making sure that he did not feel awkward and that the meal was calm and relaxed. Andre imagined himself at the head of a knightly order, thinking that his closest friend was next to him, and also that he knew all the details of the upcoming plan. She emphasized that there was no need to play roles around him, asking him to keep an eye on them without interfering unnecessarily and allowing things to develop naturally. Her flirting was just a game. She was going to continue playing her role, and he realized that now even feeding was part of her strategy, a way to keep things under control. Alina believed that her mastery of transformation shouldn't be underestimated. Even a greeting requires a certain look, but in moments of solitude, one can relax and unwind a little. They continued to exchange thoughts, and after a while, she simply said that he should not find fault with her every word, because it interfered with the naturalness of what was happening. She didn't care what anyone might offer in terms of wealth or status. The Duke was not at all to her taste, and she had no interest in him whatsoever. The Duke was taken aback by her words, but she calmly explained that money was important, but she liked people who showed kindness and tenderness, and not just material advantages. No matter how successful a person is, she would not get close to him, because sincere emotions are more important to her than external luxury and influence, even if it is great. She reiterated that there was no need to worry about it. She would never love the Duke, and no circumstances could change her inner choice. Despite all the efforts and circumstances, her heart remained free, and she knew for sure that she would not fall in love with him, no matter how bright and attractive he was. Everything was going according to plan, and in this case, it was better to focus on herself, monitoring the development of events so that everything happened without unnecessary surprises. And if she suddenly changes her attitude, don't be surprised. Perhaps new meetings and measures will be held to adjust current plans in light of her behavior. The Duke informed her that he would have to play along if she did not do anything herself to ensure that events proceeded according to the general strategy and did not disrupt order. He understood that feeling of silence when there was nothing to say, and suggested that they simply finish the dinner, sending Dion away so as not to disturb anyone else and to give the atmosphere a break. He also noted that it was worth warning her about some important points so that she was prepared for any surprises and understood what was going on. Firstly, spies can appear anywhere and at any time, just like in the bathroom, so you need to be careful, even when talking to yourself alone. This is not a problem for her. She has been watched all her life, a spy cannot scare her, and secondly, it is not worth playing roles when they are alone with each other, so as not to lose yourself. She said she wouldn't agree to pretend to be in love in real life. They would have to practice even together, and if he wasn't happy, they would first have to learn to play roles convincingly. He was already eager to end the adventure, but she believed that he would not succeed now. Soon, her appearance in Lenbird forced her to encounter Lady Janet, with whom she had not previously had contact. There was a stir. A spy had appeared, and this raised interest in what kind of noise would be raised in high society, where he already had little influence and control. She was right, and asked who exactly should be feared in order to prepare in advance and not get into an awkward position in front of influential people. He said that there was one person who really needed to be wary of, and he had to be careful about his actions to avoid getting into trouble. He was completely indifferent to what was happening, and this made Alina wonder who could behave so fearlessly around him. The thought came to mind that it could be some fierce and powerful lady, capable of keeping everyone in fear with her gaze, or it was a simple, evil noblewoman, whose intrigues and petty whims had long filled the rumors among servants and guests. However, there was no time to think about this. The next day arrived, and events were developing too quickly to dwell on guesses. Alina understood that she would have to stay away, because being near him was extremely tiring and dangerous for her nerves. At that moment, Fionel appeared, and on the horizon one could see the first suspect, whose arrival did not bode well. The first one who immediately attracted attention was not at all a fierce lady who could inspire fear with just one look. And this was not a spoiled noblewoman, whose habits and whims had long since become tiresome to those around her. He was a straightforward and decisive man, like a house, making its way through chaos and obstacles, not noticing anything around. Alina was shocked when she noticed him. It was so unexpected that she couldn't immediately understand what was happening. Fionele, noticing Alina's reaction, looked happy. She explained that she was worried about his heart and was afraid that it might get hurt again. So she came here with one purpose, apparently deciding that events could not be allowed to take their course without her intervention. This explained a lot, although Alina certainly didn't expect everything to unfold exactly like this and on such a scale. It had only been a month since the tragic death of his fiancée Ariel, taking into account the length of the funeral ceremony and the time spent on the journey. She immediately followed him after the funeral, probably hoping to take the vacant place next to him, not giving him the opportunity to be alone. The situation was too dangerous. The murder of his fiancée had happened only a month ago, and any new developments could be mortally risky. Anyone who noticed her presence risked their lives, but she still clung to him like a death grip, unwilling to let go. This meant that she was either incredibly stupid and didn't realize the danger, or she was the one behind the murder that had taken place. While watching her, it was clear that she needed to be treated with extreme caution in order not to fall into the trap of her actions. Andre noted to himself that he did not recall inviting her here or expecting such a visit, which increased the tension of the situation. Fionel explained that she knew he wouldn't invite anyone after his heartbreak, but she decided to show up anyway to reassure him. She was ready to be an uninvited guest, if only to provide at least some comfort and protection to his feelings during this difficult period. Alina, not wanting to lose control of the situation, grabbed his hand and tried to walk away with him, taking everyone else out of sight. Fionel burst into tears and begged for his sympathy to stay with her, not letting him go, showing that she truly cared about him. But if he goes too fast, she simply won't be able to keep up with him, and the situation could get out of control, leaving everyone on edge. But they ran even faster. So Alina cried harder, feeling both fear and confusion, as if all her energy had evaporated in an instant. Although they seemed to be walking slowly, they were actually running at an incredible speed, almost as if they were flying, as if every step was filled with strength and determination. Fionele noticed that she did not understand why Andre showed such concern for this woman and who she was to him at all, causing her a strange feeling of jealousy and surprise. The Duke explained that he had picked her up along the way, as if a chance meeting had turned into a need to help someone he barely knew. But sympathy took over. And yet, it cannot be said that Fionele did not suffer, because her emotions were seething inside, mixed with bewilderment, anxiety, and a little envy of someone else's closeness to Andre. She eventually caught up with them, driven by her straightforward nature. If Andre had been the finish line, she would have certainly won, demonstrating incredible willpower and tenacity. Alina felt tired after the long trip. Her waist and back ached badly, so she wanted Andre to take her hand to at least slightly ease the weight of his steps. But she didn't understand why he was refusing, because it was just a simple touch that could make her path easier and bring a feeling of support. She thought it was really quite simple, and yet her expression showed all the incomprehension, as if such a small action was a difficult task. With her appearance, she wanted to show that the deer needed to be removed from here, expressing a desire to stop unnecessary obstacles and clear the space of outside interference. He quietly tried to move her, realizing that with such people, it was better to act carefully in order to avoid conflicts and maintain control of the situation. So Alina took Andre's hand and pressed herself against him, as if she wanted to feel the support and warmth that helped her cope with the internal tension and fatigue. She decided to counterattack, declaring her hunger and fatigue, explaining that standing for long periods was hard. Her shoes were rubbing her feet, and that now she needed some peace and rest. Unfortunately, Fionela Alina came from Korea, where a sweet and childish demeanor in public was considered normal, which sometimes left those around her puzzled by her usual seriousness. Besides, she was also an actress, so dealing with this was something she was used to, and knowing how to hold her own in society seemed natural, like a second wind. Fionel noted that she was suffering greatly and suggested that she simply lie down and rest, showing concern and a desire to help, even if it seemed unusual for Alina. She asked the ladies to provide services in her privacy, after which she left with Alina, leaving Fionele to understand that intervention was necessary and that arguing was useless. Fionele tried to deny it, but quickly realized that continuing the argument was pointless, because Alina was acting confidently and was not going to back down in the face of obstacles. Finally, Alina stuck her tongue out at her, expressing playful irritation and slight mockery, as if trying to relieve the tension and show that she would not give in to her mood. And this greatly infuriated Fionelle, causing a storm of emotions that were mixed with surprise and indignation, because such a gesture was unexpected and slightly provocative. Victory for the mercy of Korea. And this daring woman could truly surprise with her tenacity and courage, as if demonstrating strength of character in her every action. In principle, she really was a strong competitor, capable of taking a hit and not losing confidence, regardless of the circumstances and attempts of those around her to influence her. Alina asked Andre whether all people in high society behave so provocatively, feeling curious and simultaneously evaluating the behavior of others in the social hierarchy. He replied that not everyone was like that, and that Fionelle was simply strange and aggressive, which was rare, especially given her high position in society and the importance of her family. Andre noted that she still had to meet influential people in various fields, and if the situation became difficult, she might need to reconsider which troubles were worth tolerating and which were not. He added that, of course, no matter how much she wanted, he was ready to make concessions. And Alina was surprised at how easily and simply he agreed to satisfy her requests. Alina offered compensation that exceeded all reasonable limits by 100 times, thus wanting to settle the dispute and demonstrate the seriousness of her intentions. They both tried to act as if the discussion hadn't happened, pretending it was just a joke, even though the agreement to renegotiate the terms was fairly easily negotiated. Alina tried to say that it was a joke, but he didn't take it that way, noting that the situation was not funny at all and required a serious approach. Promoting the audio turned out to be a tedious task, a real battle of wits in which politics, interests, and the cunning intrigues of the people around her were intertwined. The rules of society and the hidden norms of the factions, which she knew almost nothing about, turned every day into a nasty battle, where enemies were literally everywhere. Alina could only remain calm, keep herself under control, not allowing her emotions to control her thoughts so as not to lose control in a critical situation. Until the unknown criminal was found, she had to act carefully, trying to avoid any trouble and not attract unnecessary attention to herself. She also understood that she had to prevent her own death, which involuntarily brought back memories of her first days at work when everything seemed unfamiliar and frightening. I had to go through the same path again, facing old trials and inner fears that had previously seemed almost insurmountable. Andre asked if Alina had finished eating, observing her behavior and trying to understand her mood at that moment. She admitted that her appetite disappeared after she thought about the upcoming responsibilities and difficulties she would have to overcome. Alina watched him carefully as he ate, observing his every movement, analyzing his calm and confidence at the table. After some time, she finally decided to approach him, gathering all her inner courage and overcoming her shyness. When she spoke, the gentleman raised his eyes and looked at her, fixing her gaze and assessing her intentions. Alina asked if she could try some of the steak, wanting to share the meal with him and feel his attitude. But he insisted that she eat her own food, maintaining the usual order at the table and not mixing her dishes with his portion. She noticed that his steak looked much more appetizing and said that it was important for her to eat well to have strength for the work ahead. Alina added that she has to eat quality food and work hard, so she's not going to settle for whatever comes her way. She also asked that after this he cut her steak the same way he had done with his portion, showing trust and respect. They would have had to call someone to bring a second knife by now, since one pair of cutlery was not enough for their meal. So he had to use his cutlery, cutting the food and handing it to her in neat pieces. He silently sliced the steak and offered her the finished portion, allowing her to enjoy the meal without any extra effort. Alina was delighted with such attention, rejoicing at the care and attentiveness he showed at that moment. She noted that she could not eat with her own hands, and this added a special intrigue and tender dependence on him to the situation. So Alina asked him to feed her, trusting him completely and enjoying the moment of intimacy during the meal. He noticed that she really took the situation seriously, although she had put in a lot of effort herself, not expecting that anyone would refuse her. Alina opened her mouth in mild surprise, and he carefully brought a piece of steak closer to her face, as if testing her reaction. He understood that someone was constantly watching them, so their actions turned into a game that he had to follow despite his fatigue. He fed her, and a soft smile appeared on Alina's face, reflecting the warmth she felt at that moment. Alina noted to herself that this scene was amazingly beautiful, and her heart warmed for a moment with simple pleasure. Her appetite returned, and with a slight smile, she asked for desserts to be brought, as if she wanted to prolong this moment of pleasure and comfort. He found it all strange, observing how her behavior was different from usual, and tried to understand what kind of feeling was overcoming her. He only fed Alina a little with the device, not expecting that it would evoke such strong emotions and a soft reaction in her. Now he felt a strange resistance inside himself, not wanting to use the device again, although everything had been simpler before. Alina couldn't comprehend what exactly she saw when he suddenly pulled away, leaving her slightly confused and surprised. Although he was not used to preparing too carefully for dates, for Alina it seemed excessive and too thoughtful. He decided to go first, and Alina noticed how his arms and legs moved in sync, as if it were a carefully rehearsed step. He left rather quickly, moving with a slight awkwardness as if a dog was rushing about its business. Perhaps he really did need to go to the toilet. The situation remained unclear, and Alina decided to carefully prepare their game in order to unobtrusively extract the necessary information on the case. She wondered how to teach this man how to behave on dates, and suddenly a new idea came to her that could make the process easier. Of course, since there was an affair between them, she noted that she had already eaten and would like to know where the Duke had gone, showing a slight interest in his actions. The maid reported that the Duke had most likely gone to his study, and that his actions could only be observed without interference. The Duke opened the window and saw Alina standing nearby with a bouquet of flowers. Her image evoked slight surprise and joy at the same time. She stood holding the flowers and nodded to him in greeting, expressing her joy at the meeting and slight excitement. He watched in surprise at what she was doing, trying to understand her intentions and the logic of her actions, which were different from what she was used to. Alina admitted that she herself did not understand his reaction, hoping that her presence could melt his heart and evoke reciprocal emotions. In front of him was the woman he had been looking for a long time. She knocked on the window and brought flowers, causing both surprise and awe. He invited her inside, expecting her to use the door to maintain the usual boundaries of decency and order. However, Alina surprised him by climbing through the window, violating his expectations and demonstrating a slight audacity and ease. He noticed that Alina spoke about the pleasant atmosphere and how well she controlled her body, showing confidence in every movement. She, sitting fragile and graceful, suddenly showed inner strength and asked if he had developed romantic feelings for her, creating an unexpected atmosphere. He noted that they seemed to have agreed not to fall in love, and she replied that something similar had happened before, but now it was important for her to teach him a certain behavior, and she understood why she had come. She explained that the purpose of her visit was to create a situation that would awaken a light romance in the Duke's heart, leaving pleasant emotions and subtle tension in it. He noted that it was difficult for him to understand the meaning of what was happening, since she had previously refused the hand extended through the window, demonstrating independence and pride. She admitted that, frankly speaking, she simply didn't think about it in time, and by the end of the day she was completely tired, so her actions had no hidden meaning. When he noted that she always had the last word, it evoked a slight smile and a sense of the usual struggle for initiative in conversation. She explained that this skill is experience in surviving in the entertainment industry, where it is necessary to be able to maintain control and influence the situation even in small details. He realized that he simply couldn't show her the door, otherwise things would take a strange turn, and it could affect their relationship in unpredictable ways. The servants would start spreading rumors about them, so he agreed to leave her here so that she could be around quietly, without unnecessary attention from strangers. She sat down and joked, asking if it was okay to at least blink, adding a lightness and playfulness to their time together. She also emphasized that he should not worry. Her presence is only a help. She never interferes and always acts for the good of the Duke. She decided to sit quietly and read a book, leaving him the opportunity to concentrate on work, creating space for everyone's personal comfort. He only told her to rest, without interfering with her plans, giving her the opportunity to recuperate after a busy day. After that, he went to his desk, immersing himself in work, allowing Alina to enjoy a moment of peace and quiet comfort. He noted that she had been busy with things since the morning, and this was unusual to hear from him, because he usually rarely notices such little things. Her attention to detail and diligence struck him as highly unusual and admirable, adding to his interest in her personality and actions. She understood that there was no need to thank him. This was only the beginning of their interactions and time together, which would develop gradually. After a while, she fell asleep quietly on the sofa, feeling the warmth and calm that the Duke created with his presence nearby. Waking up, she thought about the time, assessing how much time had passed and preparing for the next day, full of new events. She noticed that she was wearing the Duke's clothes, which added a slight awkwardness, but also a feeling of security, as if he was caring for her even in her sleep. Her whole body ached from lying on the couch for so long, but it was nice. She needed to stretch to feel light and free to move again. Alina decided to go to the training ground to combine physical activity with a request for Andre to teach her local martial arts. She understood that frequent meetings would strengthen the intimacy between them, and that studying together would be excellent practice for romantic interactions. She decided that this was a great idea and was going to change clothes so she could go to training right away, without putting off the important matter. Upon leaving, Alina asked a servant where the Duke was, showing interest in his whereabouts and a willingness to join in the classes. The maid reported that the Duke had gone to the training ground, giving directions and creating the feeling of a normal daily routine. Alina wondered why the servant behaved so disrespectfully towards his master's guest, as if she were a nobody, although the Duke showed care and attention. Alina carefully observed her interlocutor's mannerisms, noticing every gesture and glance from top to bottom, as if before her was an opportunity to play the role of a daring villain, using the moment to her own advantage. She insisted that the maid show her where the landing was, but she only pointed beyond the wall in the distance, as if she herself was afraid to explain and was trying to avoid a direct answer. Alina didn't understand why she should argue with this behavior, because it seemed illogical and at the same time irritated her more than she could allow herself to admit. An idea flashed through her mind that perhaps the maid belonged to Ariel, and therefore did not specify the location of the site, which is why Alina was completely lost among the labyrinth of gardens. The girl was surprised to notice how tangled the garden paths were. and could not understand who created such places where it was easy to lose one's way and get lost without the slightest opportunity to orient oneself. Suddenly, Alina felt a chill, as if someone should pass by and show her the right way. At least someone who knew these places better so that she would not wander aimlessly. And then her attention was drawn to the silhouette of a man ahead, and she decided to find out who was there. Moving carefully, listening to every step and sound around. When she stepped out onto the open area, she was overcome with confusion. Fionel was standing in front of her, and this meeting was a complete surprise for Alina, causing her to freeze in place. The girl couldn't understand why Fionel had appeared in such a strange state. She herself had been wandering for a long time, trying to get her bearings, and it seemed Fionel was also looking for Andre, facing the same confusion. Fionelli inquired about Alina's destination, but the Duchess found this odd. She noticed her interlocutor's informal tone and was surprised at how easily her true colors revealed themselves without Andre's presence. Alina explained that she was going to meet the Duke and noticed that Fionel seemed to be going there too, which made the situation even more tense and confusing. However, Fionel became angry with Alina, expressing bewilderment and dissatisfaction with her appearance, as if it were an insult to her personal status or dignity. Alina allowed herself to grimace a little and asked if Fionel thought she would be scared by the screams. Her self-confidence told her that she could easily win this game. Fionelli's response was to get even more heated, screaming and running towards Alina, which made the scene tense and created the feeling that a real conflict was about to break out. Alina tried to make sense of what was happening, but events were unfolding too quickly, and she could not fully understand Fionel's motivations and behavior, remaining confused. Fionel began asking questions about Alina's noble origins, trying to verify her status and place her in the castle's hierarchy to understand how worthy of respect she was. Alina replied that she was indeed not a commoner, demonstrating confidence and inner strength, not allowing anyone to doubt her origin and status among the guests. After this, Alina reminded them that they were both just guests in the Duke's castle, and that Fionel, despite her aggression, was unlikely to be capable of serious action, which calmed the tension a little. Fionel tried to determine whether Alina had wealth or influence in the city, as if assessing her resources and capabilities to determine how to interact with her further. But Alina couldn't understand what was going on until Fionele said that if she had nothing, she should know her place, hinting at the need to adhere to certain rules and boundaries. Fionele continued to threaten, stating that if Alina's behavior did not change, she would have to face serious consequences, which created an atmosphere of danger and tension. Fionele directly promised Alina death, and these words seemed to pierce the air around her, causing alarm and wariness in the Duchess, forcing her to seriously consider the possible threat. Alina felt a slight thrill after these threats, realizing that the situation could be dangerous and that she should be careful, analyzing every step and every movement of Fionele. At that moment, she realized that Fionel could be the real killer, and her anxiety increased, because the threat seemed real and could have serious consequences for everyone around her. Alina understood that perhaps she herself did not yet realize the full scale of what was happening, but some people had already been hurt or killed, leaving a dark sense of danger. Some turned out to be weak and spineless, trembling next to the master, and this created an additional sense of threat, because such people are rarely able to protect themselves or others. Fionel's words sounded different than one might expect. They carried a sense of strength, determination, and a threat that hung over Alina, forcing her to be on guard and not let down her guard. In the very center of the deserted labyrinth, Alina Duke stood alone, unarmed, feeling a slight tension from the surrounding silence and the possibility of sudden danger. Before her stood a murder suspect whose eyes glittered coldly and whose movements were alarming. Every minute could be critical. She understood that she could not act recklessly, otherwise the situation would get out of control and the consequences would be irreversible for both parties. Any wrong move could lead to tragedy, and the thought of someone's possible death made her freeze in place, pondering every step. At first glance, the suspect might have had a weapon hidden under her lavish attire. A small knife would have easily escaped notice in this strange world. On the other hand, their physical parameters were very different, and this gave Alina at least some hope of an advantage in the event of a conflict. Thanks to the little martial arts knowledge she had gained in her home world, Alina knew she had a chance to defeat Fionel if she acted carefully. Fionel seemed to not expect resistance, acting casually, but Alina needed to be prepared for any turn of events. There was a possibility that she was not alone here, and that the minions hidden in the depths of the garden could suddenly appear, changing the balance of power. Suddenly, the feeling of being surrounded became too clear. Alina realized that she could be completely surrounded by enemies if she did not show determination. Then she heard a voice and turned around, tensing, waiting to see the source of the sound and assess the threat that might appear. The Duke met her from behind, and she immediately threw herself into his arms, feeling a sudden sense of relief and protection in his presence. Alina's heart filled with joy. She felt that she had been saved, and this feeling of security was almost tangible after the tension of the labyrinth. She wanted to understand where the gentleman had disappeared to earlier, because the fear she had experienced had left a strong mark and a desire to be near him. His gaze fell on Fionel, assessing the situation with composure and a willingness to understand the true intentions of those around him. He turned to Fionele, showing interest in what was happening, trying to determine who was really controlling the events in this strange place. Lady Alina took a step back, unsure of what to say. Her thoughts trying to collect themselves after the tense encounter and the threat that still hung in the air. She survived and understood that the master was her ally. Alone, fear would have paralyzed her movements. But now there was a protector nearby, giving her strength. Alina felt that a special aroma emanated from the gentleman, filling her with emotions and giving her confidence, as if the atmosphere itself supported her. Relief gradually replaced anxiety. She began to feel safer, as if the fog of fear was gradually dissipating, leaving room for control over the situation. Now it was time to gradually come to my senses and evaluate whether it was worth starting my own game, thinking through every step and anticipating the possible actions of my opponents. With support behind her, her fear faded. Alina understood that her gentle yet decisive energy could prove a powerful weapon in her game with Fionele. She spoke of how close she had come to death and heard Fiona's warning that she would strike if Alina got too close to the master, adding to the tension. Alina began to cautiously approach the master, sensing the injustice of the situation and the desire to be close. Realizing that her desire for protection and closeness was natural, the Duke stood in complete bewilderment, watching their behavior, and could hardly believe that such individuals as they were before him. Both girls tried to appear sweet and innocent, but at the same time they constantly argued with each other, demonstrating their irreconcilability. The situation was becoming increasingly unpleasant, and it was impossible to call what was happening something pleasant or adequate. The Duke nearly lost his balance from the chaos, and the girls continued their quarrel, oblivious to everyone around them. This confrontation could continue indefinitely unless someone intervenes and puts an end to it. Player Andre seemed to have exhausted all his strength, and it was time to move on to the decisive moment. Alina told the gentleman that she felt tired and cold. The fatigue was becoming almost unbearable. Her intention was to find the training ground where Andre was located in order to continue her actions. But having lost her way, she wandered for a long time and was so tired that she wanted him to simply take her in his arms. The Duke wasted no time and without hesitation lifted Alina into his arms, helping her regain her strength. Fionel was completely horrified, wondering why the Duke hadn't picked her up instead of Alina. He explained that even people need rest and asked to take her to her quarters so that she could recover. Alina won this little fight and told Andre that she had received a death threat. She added that Alina should stop playing with Fionel since she does not obey anyone in this situation. It also became clear that Alina could die if she continued to act in the same spirit, and Fionel clearly posed a threat to her. It was said that if possible, they could kill her on the spot. But Fionel doubted it because Alina turned out to be stronger. They grew up in different conditions, and even by their height, it is clear that Alina is more impressive, although the Duke noted that both girls are actually small. Alina admitted that this was true compared to the Duke, and added that if Fionel was the killer, it would be difficult for her to carry out the task herself. Fionel would likely appoint someone to do the job, which was scary since no one knew what was lurking in the garden and the labyrinth. Alina noted that she was afraid of the possibility of dying, but ultimately overcame her fear in the situation. She also noticed that the gentleman's answer was too simple, although she herself was almost on the verge of death. This happened often, and there was no point in expecting anything more. Alina didn't ask for much. She just wanted to be paid enough. There was no need to worry about this, and since he had nothing more to say, Alina quietly returned to her room, feeling slightly anxious but still calm. She appeared there, trembling in his arms, stepping noisily and attracting attention, as if the whole atmosphere around had suddenly become tense. If she decided to go to sleep in her own room at night, it would look strange, as if someone had disturbed the usual order, and she felt a little embarrassed. Back then, it seemed sensible for them to sleep together to avoid misunderstandings and maintain warmth between them. It created a feeling of safety and ease, as if the world around them ceased to matter. He was stunned by this unexpected proposal, unsure how to react. All his usual confidence seemed to melt away, leaving in its place doubts and a strange, difficult-to-contain anxiety. They both felt a sudden tension, as if the air around them had grown thicker and denser. Their hearts began to beat faster, and their inner state told them that any moment could change their intimacy and understanding of each other. The maids arrived promptly, offering assistance and advice on how Lady Alina should prepare for bed. Their attentiveness promised a peaceful night free from unnecessary worries, maintaining the comfort and harmony of the room. Alina didn't object, and felt pleasure at the thoughtfulness shown. This attention warmed her beyond ordinary comfort, filling her heart with quiet satisfaction and a sense of special affection. She was surprised by such meticulous preparation and decided to ditch the dressing gown, finding it amusing and unusual. Everything around her seemed strangely alluring, as if the ordinary order of things had been turned upside down before her eyes. They couldn't understand her refusal, as they had been trying to choose the best outfit. It was designed to highlight all her assets and captivate his lordship, but her love of freedom and independence made this wish pointless. The maids believed that she had nothing to be ashamed of because her body was beautiful, and it should be revealed so that its beauty could be revealed in its entirety. Alina just wanted pajamas, and the conversation turned to the fact that she would look great even in the simplest clothes, which calmed her down a little. They claimed that the gentleman would become aroused by just one touch, but she remained calm and ready to simply go to bed peacefully. It all came down to one thing, and despite their wishes, Alina was better off staying with someone than being alone or worrying about Fionele. She asked why everyone was so excited, thinking that this was not his first night. But the maids explained that in fact it was all a first. Alina was surprised because it was the first night with his appearance, and she believed that trust in him had been built over centuries, despite numerous court rules. The maid explained that it was not the number of people around, but the fact that his disposition was bright and innocent, and everyone knew what to expect from him, so everything was different. After that, he always looked at the girls coldly, as if they were stones, and the maids were amazed that such a man brought his beloved to the estate. The event could not be missed. For the Dukes, this was a chance to have an heir, and that was why she decided to help her with all her heart, considering it a duty and an opportunity to show care. It was worth starting with the right outfit, which would highlight the advantages and correspond to the importance of the moment, creating an impression of harmony and respect. But Alina simply declined the offer, deciding to follow her principles, believing that comfort and personal boundaries are more important than any outfit. She found it disgusting, but internally she overcame herself, retaining her opinion and control over the situation, feeling a slight satisfaction. Alina apologized to the Duke for the slight delay, showing respect and concern for the feelings of others despite her own stubbornness. Everyone had strange thoughts, and she had to fight for normal clothes, protecting her space and at the same time maintaining harmony in the estate. Alina had no idea what was going on here. She watched with cautious interest, trying to comprehend Andre's actions and their meaning in this strange setting. Andre explained that he had been ordered to perform this as a sign of respect for the lady, even if it only happened once. He took it seriously, despite the unusual nature of the situation. Alina hoped that it was just a joke or a trifle, but Andre confirmed that he was serious about following the instructions and fulfilling the wish, which concerned going to bed as soon as possible. She felt relieved and grateful for their shared vision. A quiet agreement seemed to emerge between them, making the atmosphere less tense and a little more comfortable. Just in case, Alina clarified whether Andre really meant sleep in the literal sense. He simply nodded and said it should be obvious, requiring no further explanation. She replied that she understood his hint, and tried not to look at him warily. The servants and those around her were already trying to instill doubt in her, but Alina remained focused and calm. Andre simply told her to just go to bed without complicating the situation, allowing her to decide for herself how to feel more comfortable in the room. After this, he blew out the candles to create a warmer and calmer atmosphere in the room, where it was almost night, and the quiet light no longer distracted from rest. After a while, they were already lying under the blanket, and silence gradually enveloped the room, creating a feeling of comfort and safety that allowed both of them to relax. Alina thought for a moment, watching Andre, and turned to him internally, wondering how to position herself and behave correctly in such a close environment. He turned away and quietly asked what exactly she wanted, without insisting on his opinion, leaving her space to decide for herself in this strange moment. She asked him which side he was more comfortable sleeping on, right or left, adding that if he took one side, it would be logical for her to lie on the opposite side so as not to disturb each other. Alina had a habit of turning over onto her left side in her sleep, and she tried to arrange herself in a way that would correspond to her internal rhythm and provide comfort for rest. Andre advised her to simply lie down and rest, without complicating the situation with unnecessary discussions. And Alina again noticed his calm and confident attitude towards the situation. He asked what else was bothering her, and Alina wondered if she could get more pillows to get more comfortable and feel as comfortable as possible in bed. Andre agreed without hesitation, allowing her to use as many pillows as she needed, and she sincerely thanked him for this attention and concern for her comfort. She was used to hugging her pillow while sleeping. It was part of her usual ritual that helped her relax and quickly fall into a calm and deep sleep. Andre noted that in the office, there was usually nothing to interfere with sleep, creating an atmosphere where everyone could find their peace and feel protected and relaxed. In fact, Alina could fall asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow, because due to the nature of her work, she often had to rest wherever she could find time to sleep. Carpenets wished she would fall asleep faster, but Alina admitted that it wasn't so easy now, as intense emotions prevented her from relaxing and completely switching off, despite the comfort. He said that she was resting next to the strongest Duke, so she should not worry, reminding her of the safety and security of having an experienced and confident man nearby. In fact, Alina was even more worried than before her first major event in her life, because this was an unusual and intimate experience that she was experiencing for the first time and completely. He asked why she was so nervous, and Alina explained that it was her first time sharing a bed with a man, which made this moment especially new and a little scary for her. Andre noted that this was the first time she had been in such a situation, and Alina felt that he said it lightly, as if not understanding the full seriousness of the moment, which gave the words a touch of innocent humor. He didn't quite understand what her remark about the playboy meant, and took her words literally, not realizing the hidden subtext and emotions she put into the remark. Andre explained that his words were unintentionally rude and asked for forgiveness, demonstrating respect and a desire to smooth over the awkwardness that arose in this difficult situation. Alina replied that everything was fine, adding that it was indeed the first time she had been so close to a man, and in any case it had been a bit rough, but she was ready to leave it behind. Alina has already become accustomed to the fact that people often make hasty conclusions about her, judging her only by her appearance, without noticing her true qualities and inner world. Andre apologized again, genuinely remorseful, and Alina felt his words came from the heart. She noted how unusual it was to apologize so many times in one moment. She understood that her reputation did not correspond to reality. No one could have thought that she would date everyone in a row, because her behavior and look showed restraint and selectivity. Andre assured her that he did not want to jump to conclusions under any circumstances and asked for permission to explain, hoping that she would listen to him without unnecessary emotions and with an open heart. The thing is that Alina had such a high level of skill in the game that her skills amazed even the most experienced opponents. And this earned Andre respect and admiration. Despite knowing it was just an act, Andre felt an unusual charm emanating from Alina. Her confidence and skill drew his attention far more than he expected. Alina was surprised to realize that his words meant that she was indeed doing a good job of the task, and that her efforts were noticed and appreciated, albeit in a playful manner. After this, she decided that it was better not to put off rest and go to bed, realizing that she needed to restore her strength for new tasks and challenges that awaited her ahead. It's always nice to hear compliments, especially when she's working hard to move forward, overcoming her weaknesses and improving the skills that are important to her. Andre understood that he couldn't allow himself to fall in love with Alina too quickly. Otherwise, emotions could take over his reason, and the situation would become more difficult for both of them. He told himself that he would be careful and try to keep his feelings under control so as not to destroy the fragile balance between them and maintain friendly understanding. After these thoughts, he lay down, turning away from Alina, trying not to violate her personal space, and allowed himself to relax a little, preparing for a night's rest. After a while, they were already trying to fall asleep, but suddenly Alina made a light sound that broke the silence, and Andre's attention was again focused on her, causing slight excitement. He advised her to stop hiding her desires and to be direct about what she wanted, understanding that honesty would help both of them feel more comfortable in this moment. Alina admitted that she simply wished him good night, and her gentle gesture showed that she cared about him without trying to make a difficult situation out of it. He decided not to pay much attention to it, simply closed his eyes and allowed himself to ignore the noisy thoughts, focusing on the peace of the night and the opportunity to rest. Nevertheless, he wished her good night in response, quietly and sincerely, so that she felt his attention and care despite all her inner doubts and caution. The next morning, Alina opened her eyes first, slowly waking up and assessing the space around her, not yet realizing that unexpected sensations and new discoveries awaited her ahead. But when she noticed that Andre was in front of her, her heart skipped a beat, and she became very scared, realizing that their closeness in the night's sleep had left unexpected consequences. She understood why it was comfortable for her to sleep on the left, next to him, because this position gave her a feeling of security and allowed her to feel his warmth and presence nearby, without fear of unnecessary closeness. Alina found herself pressed against him, and they lay in an embrace, feeling mutual trust and an involuntary affection that formed gradually and quietly, without unnecessary words or explanations. She was at a loss, not knowing how to act. The pillow shifted, and suddenly she felt that she was in Andre's arms, causing both embarrassment and a pleasant feeling of security. Despite her embarrassment, his embrace was so warm and strong that it seemed impossible to get out. She knew she had to do it before he woke up so as not to give herself away. But suddenly he also opened his eyes and watched her closely, which made her even more awkward. And she felt that the situation was going beyond the usual calm morning. He carefully watched her every movement, and Alina found it increasingly awkward and difficult to maintain a natural posture, as if every movement was under the control of his gaze. She tried to carefully turn around and free herself from his embrace, trying to regain her space and feel the independence that was so important to her at this moment. After that, she pressed her face into the pillow, trying to hide her embarrassment and calm down, trying to restore her inner balance and not show Andre how confused she was. He quietly said that he understood that she was not sleeping, and his words sounded calm, without reproach, simply as a statement of fact, forcing Alina to admit the truth and feel a slight tension. So she stood up and admitted that she was indeed awake, realizing that honesty in this situation was better than trying to hide her feelings and thoughts, which were too obvious. Alina explained that she preferred to sleep on the left, and he replied that he would remember this, showing that his attention to detail and concern for her comfort continued despite all the awkwardness. Lady Rosalind was due to arrive soon, signaling the start of a new event that would change the atmosphere and add fresh emotions to their morning, preparing Alina for new events and encounters. Alina noticed that Andre had mentioned her affiliation with the Teolin Marquis family, and she wondered how much more serious this rival was compared to Fionel, assessing the possible consequences. Andre explained that her opponent was far from being as simple as she seemed, and therefore Alina should consider changing her strategy, rethinking her approach, and preparing for the unexpected. Alina noted that Andre came out to the gate to meet her personally, and this made her uneasy, because he and Fionele had limited themselves to just a greeting at the front door and quickly hurried inside. For most guests, such displays of etiquette are normal, but in Fionel's case, the situation is special, and every gesture takes on additional meaning in the eyes of those present. Fiona arrived with him, also coming to greet the lady and believing that their meeting would be a joint one, which further emphasized the status and attention paid to Alina. It seemed that Andre did not like this at all, but he had already been informed that the lady had arrived, and he could not change the situation by remaining reserved and observing formalities. A lady with blonde hair appeared before them, whose appearance immediately attracted attention and created a sense of an important event, emphasizing her status among the guests. She apologized for appearing without an official invitation, trying to soften the formality of the moment and show respect for those present and for Alina. The gentleman noted that he had not seen this lady for a long time, and her visit was an unexpected but significant event that aroused the interest and respect of all those present. Rosalind admitted that she missed him very much and that her arrival was spontaneous. She had not had time to warn him in advance, apologizing once again for the possible breach of protocol. Fionel noted the lady's cunning, as she flew in immediately after hearing of Fionel's plans to leave, demonstrating her ability to act quickly and decisively. Rosalind then turned her attention to Fionel, bringing the conversation into a more personal direction and emphasizing the dynamic between them, as well as their reaction to the sudden arrival of the guests. Rosalind emphasized that everyone was very surprised by her visit, especially Lady Helen, whose reaction was noticeable, and the attention paid to her became the center of discussion among the guests. Lady Helen failed to show up at the party and did not notify anyone of her absence, which was perceived as extremely tactless behavior and a violation of etiquette. She attended the tea party without warning anyone in advance, which added to the tension and discontent among those present, demonstrating a lack of politeness. Rosaline effectively portrayed Fionele as someone who disrupts other people's events, emphasizing the importance of following the rules and techniques of a true lady. It was the right moment to appreciate the skill of a true lady, to demonstrate good manners and the ability to behave correctly in any unexpected circumstances. Since Fionel is too straightforward and simple, she noted that their relationship is not so close that Rosaline would be very worried about her actions and visits. In Fionel's opinion, there was no need to expect any particular reaction, since the path she had taken did not require such worries and excessive attention from Rosalind. Rosalind explained that deep down she was worried about Fionel and wanted her to remain safe, away from any possible trouble or unwanted attention. The main purpose of Rosalind's visit was to express her condolences on behalf of the capital's nobility, emphasizing respect and adherence to traditions in such a situation. Alina had an uncanny knack for suppressing jokes and ridiculing people, even though she herself might be well informed about many things. She noticed that most people tried to multitask, but they couldn't. Fionelli noted that despite all her activity and desire to get a lot done, others were doing extremely poorly, as if they were losing control of what was happening and making mistakes at every step. Rosalind admitted that she hadn't noticed anything like that, because she herself was different. Her character and approach were different from Fionel's, and she didn't pay attention to the little things that her friend noticed. After this, Rosalind turned to the fair-haired Andre. She believed that since the formalities had been concluded with the greeting, it was time to ask permission to enter and be present in the room. Alina felt completely out of place, like a nobody. Or perhaps her gaze and presence at Rosalind's were merely decoration. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Andre, feeling alienated. Rosaline, watching Alice, thought she couldn't yet be considered a serious rival, but first it was important to be attentive and focused. She also noted that it was time to think about breakfast and get her thoughts in order. Rosalind looked at Alina with slight disdain, as if assessing her shortcomings and imperfections, which were immediately obvious and left no doubt that the girl had not yet become accustomed to the Duke's company. Then she turned to Andre and asked who this girl was who suddenly appeared in their company and attracted attention with her presence and unusual behavior. Andre explained that this was the one he'd picked out and brought home. After these words, Alina was forced to introduce herself, doing so with restraint and without unnecessary emotion, so as not to seem intrusive. Rosalind admitted that she was hearing this name for the first time and wanted to understand what family Alina came from, since origin and family connections were of great importance in the Duke's circle. Alina replied that origin doesn't matter. Personal qualities and direct interaction are more important than pedigree or connections, because that's what determines respect and trust. Rosalind was surprised that the man who was next to the lady did not even pick up the fallen handkerchief. This seemed a sign of inattention and lack of upbringing, which could speak of habits and an attitude to trifles. Andre noted that the girl was useful, and Rosalind added that it was precisely because of her usefulness that he had given up on marriage several years ago, valuing the practicality and usefulness of the person next to him, and not just formalities. According to Andre, if his wife was as useful as a hunting dog, he was prepared to marry many times. This showed that a person's worth was measured by their true usefulness and dedication. The conversation revolved around usefulness, like training a hunting dog. Andre meant that people also needed to be trained and guided to be truly useful. As a duchy demands discipline and organization, it was subtle manipulation on Rosalind's part, designed to test Alina. Her words sounded simple, but they concealed a profound psychological impact, a test of the girl's ability to hold her own in society. Alina knew she'd picked the wrong guy. She had vast experience in entertainment and interacting with people, so she wasn't afraid of such manipulations and provocations, and was used to dealing with them. She expressed bewilderment that such a beautiful girl needed training and guidance like a hunting dog, which seemed strange and even offensive to her for someone who was outwardly fragile but strong in spirit. Fionel noted that such girls should be protected from unnecessary difficulties, appreciated for their beauty and grace, and protected from unnecessary trials, because their natural attractiveness is valuable in itself and deserves respect. Rosalind found this an interesting observation and expressed a desire to share a meal with Andre, demonstrating an interest in interaction and a willingness to appreciate Alina more closely, in a more relaxed and informal setting. Andre agreed without hesitation, but Rosalind clarified that she wanted to eat specifically in the company of this lady, as if testing how Alina behaved in a more intimate and personal atmosphere among influential people. The situation resembled a duel. The tension between them was clearly palpable, but Alina immediately agreed, demonstrating courage, determination, and readiness for the trials that the Duke's company could present. She realized that she was beginning to socialize and get used to the Duke's world, understanding the rules of behavior, influence, and the subtleties of relationships, gradually turning from an outside observer into a participant in events. Andre announced that it was time for him to leave, ending his presence in the room. His departure signified not only a physical shift, but also a shift in the dynamic between those present, giving them space to interact. Fionel hurried after him, trying to continue the conversation or get his attention, but he said that today was okay, and wished everyone a good day, demonstrating his concern while setting boundaries. Suddenly, Fionele started screaming very loudly. Her reaction was sharp and unexpected, as if the internal emotions and tension that had accumulated over the day found an outlet through a loud and emotional outburst. All of this greatly irritated Alina, and she wasn't at all thrilled. She'd been patiently waiting since yesterday, and now she faced a tedious wait until dinner, which filled her with inner discontent and anxiety. Alina couldn't help but smile slightly, and even the flowers on her head fell off slightly from laughter, which looked charming. The extra people had already left, leaving her in a calmer atmosphere. Only the sarcastic genius remained in the room, and Alina became curious about how she would behave alone with her, anticipating the unpredictable development of events and internal games. Suddenly, she gave Alina a decisive nudge with her foot, unexpectedly disrupting the usual order and creating an atmosphere of slight tension, forcing her to be on guard. Alina felt intense pain and complete confusion, not understanding what was happening or why she was behaving this way, which further intensified her feelings of helplessness and inner anxiety. Rosalind walked up to her and hugged her tenderly, simultaneously providing support and demonstrating control over the situation, which forced Alina to resign herself and submit to the circumstances. She addressed Alina in a menacing and confident tone, leaving no doubt about her power, which caused a mixture of fear, respect, and cautious tension in the heroine. With obvious interest, she noted that she was curious about how much Alina would need or what she wanted, causing the heroine to feel slightly wary and internally tense. Alina couldn't understand what the question was referring to, which increased her confusion and bewilderment, forcing her brain to look for meaning where there seemed to be none. Rosaline seemed to think that everything could happen easily and simply, without explanation or clarification, as if some things should be taken for granted. However, Alina firmly stated that she was not here for the money, emphasizing her own motives and inner conviction, refusing to succumb to other people's expectations and influence. Rosalind noticed that despite Alina's confidence, it was possible to offer a fairly large sum, and she was sure that the heroine intended to use the situation to her advantage, creating slight tension. She understood that no matter how much Alina offered, for Rosalind it would be a symbolic sum, with almost no real value, just a reflection of an attempt to establish her own rules. Therefore, all that was left was to directly state what she wanted, without evading or trying to avoid the question, which increased the pressure and made the situation especially difficult and tense for Alina. Rosaline seemed to want to get rid of Alina, pointing out her lack of manners, which made the heroine's behavior annoyingly frank and insolent, as if testing her boundaries. In such a situation, Alina could respond in kind, repeating Rosalind's strategy and demonstrating a willingness to play on equal terms, demonstrating determination and the ability to withstand pressure. Alina grabbed Rosalind's hand forcefully, showing both force and interest, showing both courage and cunning, hinting that she was curious to see how much she was willing to offer. Rosalind clarified that she meant trying to understand Alina's true motives, not wanting to remain in the dark and striving to clarify what goals the heroine was pursuing. Alina explained that everything must be done correctly and fairly, based on upbringing and special care, emphasizing the importance of rules, ethics, and adherence to norms in such matters. She noted that she wondered how much Rosalind had learned about such deals before coming here, as preparation could have involved studying hundreds of outfits and practical details. The dress in question was a personal commission from the previous Duchess, and its historical value and national heritage made it particularly important. Regardless of Rosalind's wealth and status, she knew that paying such a sum would not be easy, and she struggled internally between her desire to have it all and the reality of being able to do it. Suddenly, the devastated Duchess admitted her words were true, confirming the seriousness of the situation, which surprised everyone around her, as if the world around her had changed in just one moment. The thought arose that perhaps it would be worthwhile to limit ourselves to certain actions so as not to go beyond the permissible limits and not create new, unpredictable consequences. But Alina understood that sooner or later she would have to return to her homeworld, and everything that happened here was only a temporary test of her character, willpower, and determination. Her desire to reassure herself and others forced her to agree. Money and jewelry did not matter, and she was ready to give everything, if only Alina would get what she wanted and leave after that. Alina, thinking about it, realized that she could really get everything she dreamed of, and agreed, realizing that the losses would be accepted if it led to the goal. Rosalind opened her eyes to the fact that Alina was not just a girl, but a cunning traitor, asking what else she needed for complete satisfaction. Alina admitted that this was true, because human greed is boundless, and since this thing is difficult to obtain, she doubts that anyone would give it away easily. Rosalind asked her to speak more simply and to the point, which forced Alina to think about her words and realize how to accurately formulate her true desires. Finally, Alina admitted that her desire was not material. She wanted the Duke's heart, considering it the most important thing for her at the moment. Rosaline took this with disbelief, thinking that such a request sounded like a joke, and it was hard to believe that someone could so seriously desire someone else's heart. But Alina explained that this was not a game or a joke, that her real need was the Duke's heart, and nothing else had such value. At first, the conversation was about money, and Alina only played along. But now it was time to accept her real proposals, because they were honest and decisive. Rosalind could not understand where this unusual and daring girl came from, causing both surprise and irritation with her behavior. She wondered how Alina, with such courage and audacity, could survive in a world where ordinary people would easily break under the pressure of circumstances. Alina mentioned Ariel, although she called herself greedy. She still tried to stay close to the Duke, understanding the risks, including the threat of death, and boldly went for it. Unlike Fionele, she could not be called stupid, and Alina believed in her safety, relying on the confidence that there was sufficient protection from threats around her. She may have hoped to become a powerful person by using her skills and cunning to achieve her goals, which made her calculating and attentive. Or maybe she was a real killer by nature, and this circumstance made Rosalind the main suspect in her eyes and increased the tension around Alina. In such a situation, it was not important for her to show greed, because the deer did not need money, and her goal was higher and more significant than material values. The Duke's heart remained her true goal, and money, status, and position were already at her disposal, which made Alina's desire more strange and complicated for those around her. She didn't understand why giving up the Duke didn't make her want to get something else, and Rosaline insisted that she didn't need money or status, surprising Alina. Rosalind noted that everything Alina could want could be obtained instantly, and if she wanted, she could become even more powerful than she currently was without any effort. Alina couldn't understand the intentions behind Rosaline's words, because her true goals remained hidden and difficult to assess at first glance. Fionele's goals were clear. To win Andre's love, it was obvious and straightforward, leaving little doubt about her motivations and intentions. But if Rosaline didn't want money, status, or love, the question remained. Why was she fighting for the Duke, and what did she really want to achieve with her intervention? Alina noted that she had already been warned. If she did not know how to value life, the consequences would be inevitable, and she could not rely on someone else's mercy or luck. Now Alina was completely lost in conjecture and understanding of what was happening, unable to comprehend Rosalind's motives and the goals behind her actions and words. The day passed unnoticed, filled with events and thoughts, and soon it was time for dinner, when the shadows were deepening, and tension and anticipation continued to weigh on everyone present. The table was laden with strong drinks and exquisite dishes, too much for 4 people, and every element looked as if it had been specially prepared for the celebration. This rich table was a symbol of the sincere greeting of the 2 ladies. At first glance, everything looked calm and harmonious, creating the impression of a serene meeting. But in reality, all of this was only part of the ceremony. Behind the outward well-being was hidden a strict sequence of actions and special rules of conduct. There seemed to be some complex etiquette at the table, connected with the arrangement and use of cutlery. It was both surprising and interesting to observe. However, she decided to ignore it, realizing that she would hardly be able to repeat all the movements correctly, even if she had studied the rules in advance. She began to eat, and every bite seemed unusually delicious to her, as if the dishes had been prepared specifically to please not only the taste, but also the sight. Fionele watched her closely, studying Alina's every movement, as if trying to understand her habits and inner mood through the way she ate. Rosalind tried to ignore it, trying to remain calm and not get involved in observations that might upset her. After this, Rosalind noticed that they really had an unusual table etiquette, and she began to wonder where these manners could have come from, how they had developed over the centuries. She wanted to understand what ancient traditions these rules came from, because the manners seemed both strict and refined, as if they held memories of the past. Alina probably observed the feeding habits of animals in the northern mountains, trying to compare natural habits with noble customs and her own experience. Jokes about dangers where 1 second of inattention could cost her life also haunted her, creating a sense of hidden threat even in a calm atmosphere. Alina admitted that she had not previously known that animals in the mountains could use bread, and this discovery added an element of surprise and slight anxiety to her perception. Then Rosalind noticed that if Alina did not eat like a human, she was essentially no different from an animal, since habits form the differences between civilized and wild creatures. Fionele emphasized that despite all her love for her dog, they still eat separately, and attempts to combine meals with the animal most often failed. She had once tried to eat with her, but it hadn't worked. The table wasn't set up for a shared dinner, but rather resembled a decoration suitable only for Rosaline. Rosaline found that she could understand Fionele's position, as the North was famous for its wild animals and harsh lands, and she found this experience completely different from normal society. She didn't have to pretend around him. Everyone was united against Alina, and Rosaline didn't miss the opportunity to take advantage of Fionel's moment of inattention, acting subtly and decisively. All those present were noble women, and Alina came to the conclusion that the leader, Rosaline, probably did not realize the full extent of her inner position and the power of influence on what was happening. If she really were a beast feeding on breadcrumbs from the ground, it would not change her essence. But in her thoughts, a comparison arose between wild and human habits. After that, she took the knife and stuck it into the meat grinder, as if demonstrating determination and strength, which was combined with her attention to detail and emotional reaction. Alina mentally admitted that in such a situation, she would rather grab and bite Lady Rosalind's neck if it were necessary, demonstrating her inner rage and determination. And after that, she smiled, as if asserting her superiority and confidence. But the smile was barely noticeable, mysterious, leaving room for interpretation. This reaction left Fionel extremely frightened. Her usual confidence wavered, and she felt an unusual anxiety that was difficult to hide even under a mask of calm. Alina noted that it seemed like she had nothing left to bite off, demonstrating cool reasoning and an understanding that there was no danger at the moment, and that fear was just an illusion. She clearly did not like gnawing bones, and this emphasized her sophistication and choice in behavior at the table, which differed from the habits of animals and emphasized the humanity of her actions. Fionelli was surprised and could not understand how such a tiny dog could act so self-confidently, as if she was the main one and more important than everyone around her. Fiona preferred to simply remain silent, watching the elders sort things out among themselves, without interfering and leaving room for them to maneuver. Rosalind noted that their behavior was more like that of animals, and suggested that their thinking was also at a similar level, devoid of subtle diplomacy. Alina explained that it was precisely because of such directness that the Duke had chosen her, and that Lady Rosalind could try to prove herself in the same way if she decided to. They were all smiling, but there was a hidden conflict in their eyes. Each one was ready at any moment to show their strength and fight each other. Rosaline admitted that she knew how wild and complex the Duke's taste could be, so meeting his demands would be extremely difficult and risky. Unfortunately, the habits and upbringing conditioned by her high status did not allow her to act as freely and naturally as the situation required. At this point, the Duke intervened, emphasizing that Rosaline's noble origins truly corresponded to her position, and there could be no doubt about it. Among all those present, the Duke stood out with a special strength and confidence, like a real lion, whose gaze and posture showed that he owned every detail around him, and the world seemed to bow before him. The Duke remembered that Lambert would not have dared to question their position before, because there was a huge social gap between them that seemed insurmountable, like a wall between two worlds. Rosaline's status was completely out of step with the norms of their circles, and marriages between such families were often rejected without much explanation, leaving any hope of agreement only in fantasy. Rosalind tried to explain her feelings and actions, insisting that her father had made a mistake in refusing the proposal and that the decision was unfair, burdening her with the consequences of other people's decisions. The Duke, after listening to her, noted that he now thought about it differently, and perhaps all the events had turned out for the better, as if quietly summing up the previous disputes and misunderstandings that remained between them. He also couldn't hide the fact that Rosalind's status sometimes irritated him. It interfered with and sometimes caused discomfort in communication, making each meeting a little more tense than he would have liked. The Duke always found it easier and more natural to be in nature, among animals, to relax on the land and feel free, when he did not have to think about status or adhere to the strict conventions of society. He seemed to have built an invisible iron wall between them, declaring that they were completely unsuitable for each other and that the social differences were too great. After this, Alina noticed that it seemed that she and the Duke were ideally suited to each other in terms of status, although outwardly this looked unexpected. She added that she also considers comfort more important than conventions and that nature, its freedom, and the animal world around her are close to her. She truly connects with the feeling of living in nature, being close to animals, and the simple joys that make existence more real and sincere. The Duke smiled at the thought of an alliance with such an independent and courageous girl, like a huge cat with whom he could walk through life by his side. This is the true state of their families, and he has made it clear that he has no intention of conforming to the traditional standards of Rosalind's family. He then asked Rosalind how she felt about it, expecting to hear her honest opinion, not hidden behind polite words. She replied that she did not dare question his lordship, and that her presence there was not for nagging or checking, but solely on a business matter. The Duke explained that his thoughts were focused on other reasons, and that the main one was the desire to see his master, which was of primary importance to him. As she had said earlier this morning, Rosaline had come to offer her condolences on behalf of the capital's nobility, fulfilling her duty and obligations. Alina, Duke of the North, called for servants who brought some papers and letters for the Duke, carefully folded and signed as if they were awaiting his attention. Among them was a letter from people who missed the Duke and Alice, asking to convey their wishes, hopes, and gratitude for past meetings. Each letter was written with special courtesy and care, so Alina understood that the Duke would certainly want to answer them, not leaving a single message unattended. She couldn't help but think about how much effort it had taken to personally deliver so many letters for André, and how much patience she had shown in carrying out the task. A man who couldn't stand the noisy capital's people was now faced with a whole herd of intrusive and curious visitors, like herbivores attacking out of curiosity. It didn't matter that he was the king of the jungle. His patience was being tested again, and the noise around him continued to irritate and tire him. Alina was thinking that a confrontation with a crowd of herbivores would be inevitable. Although she thought that victory was almost in the bag and the situation was under control, she couldn't have foreseen that such an unexpected ace up her sleeve would appear, which would completely change the situation and force her to reconsider all her plans. This also became a symbol of total defeat. Circumstances were not in her favor, and every step required much more effort than expected. That evening, the Duke sat in his study, lost in thought, surrounded by a silence that seemed strangely tense after the chaos of the day. He spent his time reading letters for hours at a time, carefully studying every word, trying to understand the mood and thoughts of the senders. His eyes were tired from reading, and he couldn't understand why there was so much noise around him again. Although the atmosphere in the office should have been calm, the noise seemed mysterious. The Duke could not determine where it was coming from, and this irritated him, because he was used to being completely concentrated on his affairs. Understanding that at such a moment of his holiness it was difficult, Alina decided to encourage him, to support him with attention and presence, in order to ease the mental tension a little. Along with the services, she approached him, offering help and care so that he would not feel alone and could cope with his current responsibilities. She noted that it was a little noisy, but the Duke reassured her with his understanding, as if acknowledging that these were trifles compared to important matters and concerns. He tried to remember what Alina had said in the middle of the day, but now his attention was focused on appreciating her presence and support. When he looked up and met her gaze, the Duke was visibly embarrassed, not expecting her attention and understanding to be so obvious and touching. Alina did understand that the clothes she had chosen could be a little embarrassing to the Duke, creating unwanted sensations, and this added a subtle touch of awkwardness. All these moments were part of the care for the new maids, who needed to be guided and supported so that they quickly got used to the palace order. The Duke noted that the butler also constantly gave advice on how to spend time with the lady, and this interference was constant but habitual. The butler and other servants constantly prompted, advised, and corrected his actions, creating a feeling of constant control and the need to take into account every detail. Alina understood that all of this was quite normal, part of palace life, where attention to detail and care for the lady were an integral part of the daily routine. Alina felt a little embarrassed, but she understood that she couldn't hide behind shyness forever. She needed to show determination and act decisively, even if her heart was beating faster. She watched him, trying to understand what he was doing, what his thoughts and emotions were, and studied every movement with interest, as if revealing a secret that he himself did not reveal. It was difficult for her to form a complete picture of him. He remained a mystery, and his every action raised questions, leaving room for conjecture and ambiguity. He insisted that everything was fine, but his behavior showed great embarrassment. His eyes avoided direct gaze, and his movements were awkward and tense, as if he wanted to hide. Those who don't care never have burning ears, never feel that internal tension that makes their face red and creates the impression that everything could explode from awkwardness. But they continued to sit next to each other, as if locked in their own little world, exchanging glances full of embarrassment, and each moment stretched out, creating a strange but quiet atmosphere. He was incredibly awkward in such situations, so Alina decided to change the subject to ease the tension and steered the conversation in a calmer direction, trying to distract attention. She began talking about Roslin, mentioning how well he had handled his duties today, trying to show respect and maintain a positive tone in the conversation, creating a gentle transition to a neutral topic. The gentleman noted that it was easier to do business with her than against her, and that formal methods were not always necessary when a personal approach could be used, allowing for faster and more effective achievement of goals. He decided to broach the topic of the cancelled engagement and explained that the reason lay in his mother, a woman with great ambitions, who sought to marry him off to a representative of the capital's elite in order to advance herself. She wanted not only to arrange a profitable marriage, but also to enter high society herself, using family connections and her son's status, which forced him to experience an internal conflict between duty and personal desires. He admitted that he spoke about it because he harbored a grudge, and it was this feeling that influenced his decisions and reactions, making past events a heavy burden that he could not fully forget. Alina noted that perhaps the situation is not as tragic as it seems, and that one should not always perceive past grievances as final regrets, since other nuances can be found within them. He was frightened by her words and anxiously asked why she decided that this was regret, not realizing that her observations were more accurate than he himself could have supposed in a moment of emotional confusion. Alina explained that he himself had spoken about his hidden resentment over the engagement's rejection, and it was this admission that allowed her to conclude that there were hidden emotions in his behavior that he did not express. He said that her assessment was questionable and considered her an intrusive woman, referring to Roslin, thereby emphasizing that other people's observations and comments may be unpleasant, but sometimes reflect the truth. She created the appearance of a kind and elegant woman, but at the same time she did not hesitate to use threats, demonstrating that external grace and internal methods of pressure can be combined to create a complex image. He was surprised when he asked for details, and Alina said that when she tried to negotiate money to leave the gentleman alone, Rosalind did not hesitate to insist on her terms. He asked how much she was offering, and Alina gave a brief account of the events, explaining how the discussion had unfolded and showing that her approach was pragmatic yet daring. She also noted that the gentleman made an effort, tried to be active and interested, which made her notice his attentiveness and willingness to participate in solving problems, despite the awkwardness. But at the same time, she noticed that he was immersed in his thoughts, as if something was deeply troubling or occupying him, and this was reflected in his behavior, making his gaze thoughtful and a little distant. When he learned of the proposed amount, he realized that it was equal to 20 years of his family's budget, which shocked him and forced him to reconsider his attitude towards his circumstances and the resources at his disposal. Alina then thought that perhaps she should have agreed to the offer, since then she could have gotten something out of it and concluded the matter without leaving any room for further arguments and misunderstandings. She was surprised at how high the Duchess's position was, because even if one wanted to enrich oneself through the Duke's inheritance, one had to take many factors into account and approach any actions with caution. This raised even more questions, since she had no particular reason to do so other than her personal observations and analysis of the situation, and each new detail made the picture more complex and multi-layered. They were genuinely curious about Alina's purpose. She moved with complete determination, as if every step had been carefully planned, and her motives remained a mystery, beckoning to be unraveled. After that, he cast a look at her full of bewilderment, as if trying to understand the essence of her actions and sense hidden intentions. But everything remained a mystery, and he did not find an answer. He was exceptionally handsome, with chiseled features and a calm gaze, and Alina felt a slight embarrassment, hesitating before deciding to look him straight in the eyes, feeling an unusual attraction. He wondered if perhaps her interest in him was connected precisely with his appearance, with those features that always attracted attention, aroused admiration, and left people with a feeling of quiet awe before his appearance. Then Alina hinted that it might be a matter of his physical grace, his movements, his posture, the ease with which he moves, and the effortless energy that emanates from him, which involuntarily attracts the gaze. He acknowledged that it was possible, realizing that her attention could be drawn not only by her appearance, but also by an inner strength, invisible to most, but palpable in every movement and glance she caught. Alina already understood that he was capable of a lot, and this gave her confidence, allowing her to feel like an equal, not being lost in the face of his status and attractiveness, feeling an inner strength that does not depend on position. And then he showed her a letter, important and personal, which he hoped would contain answers to his questions and partially reveal his secrets, intended only for her, opening up a new level of understanding between them. Alina agreed to read it, and he noted that she was helped by the translation bracelet, which made understanding the text easy and natural, even if the words seemed complex and filled with subtle nuances. When she noticed that he seemed to be little interested in the royal bustle, it caused him a slight smile and surprise at the same time, since it was so rare for anyone to notice his true feelings amidst the court games and conventions. But the gentleman noted that he could not completely ignore what was happening, because the responsibility for every action and connection with others was too great to leave them unattended and allow events to develop on their own. The crown prince proved to be an ambitious and determined man, striving for the throne, and every move in his circle must be assessed with the utmost care, so as not to miss the slightest opportunity or threat. He was the most influential of all the king's grandsons, and maintaining good relations with him became not just a matter of choice, but a strategic necessity, important for maintaining position and the security of one's interests. At the same time, the Duke was in the position of a lowly vassal, deprived of the right to object or make independent decisions, which caused irritation and tension, forcing him to carefully consider every action and word. He can't even refuse obligations, and if it is impossible to avoid it, all that remains is to accept it and enjoy the situation as much as possible. Alina also noted that they would have to visit the capital anyway to study the society and its laws, so it would be better for him to focus on the positive aspects of this trip. When she looked at him again, Alina's gaze was attentive and deep, as if she was trying to read his every thought and understand his hidden intentions. And as she stood up, she felt his gaze on her, which followed her every movement with attention and slight curiosity, mixed with respect. She sat on his lap, and this caused him great confusion. His thoughts became confused, and his heart suddenly accelerated its rhythm, disturbing his usual calm. Alina said that she really wanted to go to the capital, and there was so much determination and confidence in this desire that he realized that arguing was useless, and he couldn't understand why everything happened so suddenly, as if the events had fallen upon him at once, leaving only surprise and slight anxiety. Alina, Duke of the North, again insisted that she wanted to go to the capital, asking him to take her with him, and he, although hesitantly, agreed that she would go too. He asked her to simply join him, as if he were his escort, but Alina refused, noting that she did not want to go as something secondary and unnecessary. He didn't understand her wariness, explaining that no one could see them and no one would judge them, so he didn't understand why she was limiting herself like that. Alina stated that his attempts to appear confident and attractive looked unconvincing and even disgusting, and this irritated her to the depths of her soul. She admitted that she was simply joking to create a plausible legend about how she begged to be taken to the capital, adding a touch of irony to her persistence. Despite all this, she emphasized that he should remember their trip together, because they would have to go to the capital together and act as one. Evening gradually gave way to night, and Alina, feeling tired after a long day, decided it was time to rest and lay down on the bed, closing her eyes and relaxing. Before going to bed, she said goodbye to him, and he remained on the sofa, immersed in his own thoughts, as if trying to comprehend what had happened and calm the storm of emotions. He felt very confused, unable to cope with the events that had just happened, and this state seemed to be tearing him apart from the inside. Every moment he felt like he was losing control of himself, as if his mind and heart were going crazy from all this confusion and tension. Alina felt a little surprised when he informed her that Lady Rosalind had invited her to tea, as it was an unexpected turn of events that made her tense. She immediately noted that she would not be able to come in the same outfit as yesterday, realizing that a repetition would look ridiculous and inappropriate for a formal event. The maids explained that they did not have suitable dresses for such an occasion, and then Alina suggested that they inform Rosaline that she would not be able to attend. However, one of the maids warned that one should not decline an invitation from a person of higher status. Otherwise, it would be perceived as a sign of disrespect. Alina firmly said that no matter how much she wanted to, she would not be able to show up because she did not have suitable clothes, and this was not subject to discussion or compromise. They began to convince her that even if she came in the simplest clothes, it would not be a disgrace. But Alina remained adamant and was not going to accept the invitation. She asked whether the maid would suffer if she did not bring her to tea, showing concern for her subordinates and fearing possible consequences. The maids replied that they did not know how Rosaline would react, so Alina decided to agree anyway, so as not to expose herself or them to risk. She asked that a letter of her consent be sent immediately to the Duke, formalizing the consent and observing all formalities. Alina felt that the very atmosphere around her was oppressive, as if Rosaline was behaving provocatively and brazenly, frightening her with rumors and her manners, creating a tense impression. But Alina already had a well-thought-out plan, and she knew that she could act in such a way as to bypass all obstacles and maintain her own dignity. After some time, Alina came to Rosaline's house, ready for the meeting, determined and reserved, in order to show herself in the best light and act thoughtfully. Rosaline was surprised to see Alina, her unexpected visit disrupting the usual routine, causing a mixture of curiosity and slight surprise in the lady. Everyone was shocked to see Rosaline come to the tea party looking as if she had chosen it purely in defiance of propriety and expectations. Alina noted that Rosaline had insisted on this visit, so she agreed to come, although she herself understood perfectly well how strange it looked from the outside. At the same time, Rosaline made it clear that Alina did not have suitable clothes, and this did not stop Alina from agreeing, emphasizing her readiness for any unexpected events. Alina thought that this was still better than coming in rags, and although the situation was awkward, choosing this form of clothing at least looked neater. She again noted to herself that this was certainly better than being completely unprepared, and that some element of dignity still remained in her appearance. Rosaline admitted that she would have to put up with it, because even rudeness should have its limits, especially when it came to the guest's appearance. Alina replied that there was nothing she could do. She really didn't have any other clothes, and she was forced to appear in the form she had. She added that unfortunately, last night the Duke had torn her clothes to shreds, leaving her with no choice but to appear in that form. The expression on Rosaline's face was indescribable, a mixture of surprise and displeasure that was difficult to hide, and it increased the tension between them. Alina was pleased with herself and allowed herself to imagine any scenes and situations, because in this she found a strange pleasure and a sense of control over the moment. Rosalind claimed that Alina had come deliberately to insult her, perceiving such an appearance as a challenge that could hardly go without consequences. It was easy to tell a vulgar lie with such obvious intentions. Only Rosalind seemed too confident in her interpretation of Alina's actions. Alina explained that she was only imitating her obscenity. If she had observed even basic politeness, Rosalind might have forgotten about previous misunderstandings and disrespect. At the same time, Alina noted that Rosalind should be more attentive to those around her, and take into account that her perception of other people's actions does not always coincide with reality. It seemed like common sense would have been enough to understand this, but there was still tension between them, and every word had its own hidden meaning. They continued to talk, as if competing with each other, constantly interrupting and pushing for new reactions, each phrase filled with inner meaning. Rosalind added that she would soon be leaving, as numerous matters awaited her in the capital, and this meant that meetings with Alina would become rare and difficult. It will be really difficult for them to see each other, especially considering that Alina is a commoner and does not have official status in the capital's upper circles. But Alina said that they would still cross paths in the capital, since she would be going there to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the founding, accompanying the Duke as his partner. Rosalind was shocked and asked again if Alina really intended to go, not believing that this could happen, because such a chance comes once in a lifetime. Alina explained that the Duke was very caring and agreed to her request to accompany him, even when she begged him to take her with him on the helicopter. He immediately allowed it. Rosalind could hardly believe that his lordship had betrayed his own dignity and allowed Alina to accompany him, violating all conventions and rules of propriety. Rosalind's thoughts were full of disbelief. It seemed impossible to her that the Duke had so easily given up his status and allowed such an unusual rapprochement with Alina. Elena smiled, showing confidence, and noted that her Duke would never sell his dignity to a woman he had already possessed, defending his own sense of honor. Rosaline was so angry that it seemed like her rage could burst out, clenching her fists and glaring at anyone who dared to stand in her way. Suddenly, the sound of a door was heard in the room, and everyone felt that someone had entered, breaking the usual order and unexpectedly attracting the attention of everyone present. The Duke appeared before them, confidently and calmly stepping into the room, his gaze immediately stopping on Alina, as if he knew that it was with her that he needed to act. Rosaline didn't expect the Duke to appear at that moment. Her eyes widened in surprise and her heart sank, as if she had a premonition that events would not go according to her plan. From the outside, it looked like Rosaline was making fun of Alina, but the Duke couldn't figure out her true motives. And this added tension to the atmosphere in the room. It was urgently necessary to show that Alina had deliberately ruined the tea party, creating the appearance of her confusion and uncertainty in order to increase the psychological pressure on Rosaline. The Duke noticed that Alina was in tears, her eyes shining with fear and anxiety, and this made it clear that her plan had begun to work, causing internal irritation in Rosaline. Alina burst into tears deliberately so that she would not have the opportunity to justify herself, making her position as vulnerable as possible, and at the same time arousing the Duke's sympathy. The Duke walked up to Alina and pulled her close, feeling a sense of control and confidence that he could protect her and manage the situation at the same time. Alina continued to cry, letting her emotions out, and this only strengthened the impression of her innocence and genuine fear in front of Rosaline. She felt happy knowing that she had managed to outwit Rosaline, feeling in control of the situation and feeling satisfied with her cunning and thoughtfulness. The Duke turned to Rosaline, showing that he saw everything that was happening and was ready to intervene at any moment to keep control of events in his hands. He made it clear that there was no room for her to dominate society, as if reminding Rosaline of the limits of her influence and who was really in charge. Rosaline was furious again, her face tense, and she realized that the Duke had taken control of the situation, leaving her beyond her control and power of influence. She turned away in anger, trying to hide her emotions and internally asserting that she knew more than the situation allowed her to admit, trying to maintain her dignity. Alina continued to cry in the Duke's arms, feeling warm and protected, and this further strengthened her position, making Rosaline feel powerless. Since Alina had sent the letter, the Duke was able to approach and easily catch her hand, as if an invisible thread connected them, controlling every movement and moment. If it had not been for her deliberate action, much could have happened without the Duke's knowledge. But her actions helped keep the situation under control and direct events in the right direction. The Duke could not understand how Rosaline dared to behave so brazenly. Her insolence and attempts to dominate seemed unacceptable and irritating to him. The situation has returned to Alina's favor, and if events end at this stage, Duke Andre will long remember how subtly she managed to outplay her opponent. Elena understood that she had to see the game through to the end, so she tried to control her emotions and act as pathetic as possible so that winning would look natural. Alina approached the Duke, saying she was cold and wanted to come inside, demonstrating vulnerability while simultaneously creating a reason for the Duke to show concern. He picked her up, intending to carry her inside, demonstrating strength and protection, and at the same time strengthening his influence over the situation, allowing Alina to feel confident. The Duke noted that the tea party was over, thus emphasizing that order had been restored and his authority over the proceedings reasserted, leaving his rival without the opportunity to interfere. Rosaline bit her lip, hiding her emotions, but inside she was seething, realizing that her attempts to control the situation had failed, and the Duke was in complete control of what was happening. The Duke once again noted that Alina could be free, thereby confirming his affection for her and emphasizing his role as protector and master of the situation. Alina was already smiling, feeling an easy victory, because her trick had worked perfectly, and she was able to gain an advantage over Rosaline without any unnecessary stress or risk. She decided that, as is the classic practice, she should deliver the final blow, securing her advantage and leaving her opponent completely at a loss, emphasizing her mastery of the game. Alina turned and looked at Rosaline, her gaze full of determination and inner strength, showing that she was in complete control of the situation and ready to finish the game victorious. She raised her hand sharply and showed her middle finger, demonstrating her insolence and readiness not to obey anyone who tries to limit her. Alina felt joy, because it seemed to her that such behavior was very bold and daring. It seemed to confirm her inner independence. Rosaline was angry at this action. She was overcome with confusion, and she did not know how to react correctly to such an unexpected challenge. The work was done to perfection, and the Duke performed magnificently, showing mastery in every movement and precision of execution. She noted that he arrived just in time and was delighted with how naturally and flawlessly he played his role in the situation. Alina was worried that his acting sometimes looked awkward, but now he did an excellent job, demonstrating confidence and skill in every gesture. It was time to stop rejoicing over her victory and focus on preparation. The Duke had called in tailors to start sewing several new dresses for her. Alina explained that she had only handed over the letter that morning, and he had immediately insisted that the tailors begin work as soon as possible and speed up the process. She knew she couldn't continue the story as it stood, But before she could move on, the Duke had something important to tell her. The further Alina progresses, the more options she will have to react to what is happening, choosing the right answers on the way to her goal. Here, she had to learn to cope with a wide variety of situations, turning them into experience, as her performance became more and more mature and convincing. She had to realize that strength lies not only in weapons, but also in the ability to anticipate circumstances, because simple skill will not be enough for success. He noted that to achieve this, Alina must possess knowledge that will help her navigate complex social and personal situations without making mistakes. They had 20 days left before their trip to the capital, during which time she needed to master manners, social skills, and basic cultural literacy. Among other things, Alina had to become an exemplary noblewoman, demonstrating proper behavior and the ability to conduct herself in high society. She felt a strange surprise, as she had previously considered herself a rude and uncultured girl, far removed from the ideals of noble refinement. She felt her role was limited, and she would be unable to live up to the high standards of society she aspired to. Alina couldn't understand why the Duke had decided to completely change the plan. He explained that to enter high society and be accepted, one had to master their manners and language, and learn to understand the nuances of conversations and reactions. Without a clear understanding of how to conduct a conversation, respond to comments, and interact appropriately, it would be impossible for her to gain the trust of the right people and create the impression of a worthy, confident person who can be trusted. Only by mastering the art of communication could Alina hope to obtain the necessary information and build relationships that would bear real fruit, allowing her to find allies and advance socially without unnecessary risks. The Duke noticed that she was worried about the whole process of training, but deep down he was concerned about the family's reputation and how they would be perceived by others, while striving to simultaneously maintain her confidence and preserve the authority of his own house. The Duke's reputation was strong and well-established enough that Alina alone couldn't ruin it with even a casual mistake, no matter how serious it seemed. His family remained high-ranking, and any minor lapses could be smoothed over. He was more concerned with how others would perceive her than with that. He wanted people to respect her, to see her confidence and ability to carry herself with dignity, and he was willing to help her find inner strength and self-esteem. He could have ignored her, but he watched her every move, realizing that her actions were important, and that the game that had begun between them and society was only just getting going, and that losing her attention now would be unforgivable. Alina asked if he'd studied the basics, and the Duke admitted he hadn't yet. He calmly acknowledged his inexperience, indicating that he recognized the need for training but wasn't yet ready to fully commit to the process. She suggested they study together to make learning easier and more fun, but he declined, not wanting to participate right away. He wanted to observe from the sidelines and gradually become involved, maintaining control. Alina insisted that he should not refuse, reminding him that he had never had to participate in such verbal duels before, and that this experience was extremely useful and necessary, especially if he wanted to support her and be there for her in society. The situation was completely different, tense and serious, and now much depended on their actions. Every step, every word could have consequences, so it was crucial to act thoughtfully to achieve their goal and avoid mistakes. Alina wanted the training to take place together, as she planned to give him subtle cues, and working together would allow him to better understand her hints, making the process more interactive and interesting. He finally agreed, and joy lit up her face as they could now work together, building on each other's skills, turning every session into an opportunity to grow closer and more confident. At first, his desire was particularly strong, as if an inner fire were pushing him to action, creating a feeling of inevitable participation and complete immersion in the training, which did not leave a moment for doubt. To make the lessons more engaging, they decided to make a bet, turning the learning into a game where every step was accompanied by excitement and a little competition, adding a playful touch to the process. Every action became a real battle, where the stakes seemed high, almost life or death, and the tension grew, forcing them to pay attention and give themselves completely to the task. Alina explained that all of this is just a way to learn, comparing the process to a commendation sticker at school, which motivates a child to try harder by creating positive reinforcement for each achievement. When she learned that he had never received praise, she confessed that she herself had been a real hooligan as a child, and this admission surprised him, causing slight bewilderment at such unexpected frankness. He tried to object, considering it impossible, but she only denied it, stubbornly calling him a hooligan, which caused slight irritation, simultaneously mixed with a feeling of amusing contradiction. Alina announced that whoever mastered the secret language first would have the right to demand the fulfillment of a wish from another, creating an interesting incentive for learning and encouraging active competition between them. He agreed that it was possible and not too difficult, and she proposed a bet, confident in her own superiority and anticipating the pleasure of a possible victory in a game that seemed easy. However, she was firmly confident of her own victory, and the Duke gladly accepted the challenge, rejoicing at the opportunity to test himself, to check his own strength and skills in the context of a joint lesson. Alina reminded him that studying is a shared experience, and it's important to support each other, not forgetting about mutual assistance and teamwork, so that the process is effective and brings satisfaction to both. The loser of their competition had to grant the winner's wish, which added fun and motivation to the lessons, turning ordinary learning into an exciting game with elements of amusing punishment. When the conversation came to an end, Alina was going to work on the belt before the tailors arrived, who were expected in the morning. And it was planned that they would arrive by lunchtime, so that everything would be ready and proceed according to a strictly established schedule. He noted that he had already asked the tailors to hurry, reminding them that no one should be delayed and that everything should proceed according to plan, creating a sense of strict discipline and order in the work ahead. No one had the right to be late, and this strict rule added organization to everything that was happening, creating confidence that the process would proceed smoothly and without unnecessary delays, as planned in advance. The tailor suddenly entered the room, announcing that he was ready to begin work, adding to the dynamics and spurring the atmosphere, as it was now possible to immediately move into action without wasting a minute. He greeted the Duke and confirmed that work could begin, demonstrating his full readiness to act without delay and ensuring that all upcoming activities in the premises would begin in a professional manner. The Duke immediately went to the fitting, showing impatience and interest in the result of the tailor's work, wanting to see as soon as possible how the outfits would look and to what extent the master would take into account all the details and wishes. The tailor recorded all the Duke's details and noted his magnificent body, adding a touch of professional admiration to the work and demonstrating the respect for form, proportions, and the features of the figure that were essential for a perfect fit. The Duke watched the tailor's work with curiosity, assessing the progress of the work and wondering how each detail would fit together in the final image, trying to predict the result and the quality of execution. The tailor began taking careful measurements, carefully assessing the lightness of the fabric and trying to figure out how best to highlight the advantages of the outfit, so that each element of the dress would be harmonious and highlight Mrs. Alina. But suddenly the Duke grabbed his hand, showing impatience and forcing the master to stop for a moment. Showing the importance of following precise instructions and not wasting time on unnecessary actions that could disrupt the process. He emphasized that the tailor clearly stated that he was ordering a dress, not a suit, and that any misunderstanding was unacceptable, creating an atmosphere of strict discipline and a clear understanding of the task so that the result would meet expectations. The tailor tried to explain that he thought the work was for the Duke, but his words failed to convince those present, adding to the feeling of tension and the need to focus entirely on the specific order. The Duke, suppressing his growing irritation, made it clear that any mistake would be severely punished, as if he was ready to nail to the wall anyone who dared to disturb the order, demonstrating all the power and inflexibility of his character. Alina noticed that the tailor seemed open to everything new. She understood that creative people often live a slightly different life, and this slight whimsy of theirs manifests itself in every detail of their work, making their outfits unique. She added that she was tired of wearing the same thing and wanted something fresh and unusual, so that her wardrobe would include new shapes, fabrics, and ideas that could enliven her look and give her confidence. The Duke, after listening attentively, decided not to disturb the tailor and dismissed him, giving him complete freedom of action. He understood that inspiration requires space, and he allowed the master to immerse himself in the creative process. The tailor expressed his sincere gratitude to Milady for her trust and support, feeling a surge of inspiration. His thoughts were already sketching out future creations that were destined to surpass all previous works and become masterpieces. The Duke turned, noticed the quiet whispers, and cautiously asked why someone was discussing something secretly. His gaze was full of displeasure, as he considered any outside attention unacceptable. Despite Alina's request to calm the tailor down, he continued to watch what was happening closely, like a watchman watching every movement, assessing everything and everyone around him with his characteristic sternness. It seemed to Alina that the Duke himself should have calmed down, but his gaze remained persistent and attentive, studying her every movement, as if he was looking in her for answers to his own questions. He wondered how he could hide his true thoughts by pretending to be completely immersed in his work, although deep down his attention was directed to completely different, more personal matters and emotions. Alina reminded him that there was a mountain of paperwork waiting in his office that required his attention, and that delaying his return could cause problems that were best resolved in advance, rather than put off until later. He offered to help right there, among the fabrics and sketches, and at that moment the tailor announced that all the measurements had already been taken, and they could begin creating an outfit completely ready to embody the Duchess's ideas. The tailor added that he was putting all his skills, experience, and inspiration into creating a dress that would make Lady Alina the most beautiful woman in the entire room, emphasizing her advantages and the grace of her figure. The Duke noted that the master is quite self-assured, but this confidence only invigorates him. His talent and creativity allow him to create outfits that are capable of surprising and inspiring even the most discerning guests. Alina declared that she was ready to trust the tailor completely, as she already felt her own beauty and confidence. Her inner sense of self-worth inspired her, and she knew the outfit would only highlight her natural beauty. In fact, she noticed that the tailor had hardly come into the office for the last few months, preferring to stay close to the process, observing and preparing everything to create the perfect outfit. The tailor then said that under these conditions he would be able to sew the best dress, one that would fully reveal Lady Alina's beauty and highlight her figure, creating a striking and elegant look worthy of high society. Despite all the advantages of the capital, labor is valued differently here, and it's important to consider the opinions of high society. A job that seems ideal to one person may be perceived differently in aristocratic circles, and this must be taken into account. She offered to look at the design of the tailor, who admired her image, and noted that she was ready to pay for work that met the capital's fashion standards, so that every detail of the dress looked perfect and harmonious. The master said that since she was going out into high society, he decided to offer one of his best options, which would be suitable for the special occasion. The dress turned out to be modern and luxurious, perfectly emphasizing Ms. Alina's figure and demonstrating her elegance in all its fullness. He added that if she liked the design, he could make it in 5 different colors to suit any mood. Previously, the Duchess did the same. She chose an outfit based on her mood, and the extra options were simply put away, not remaining idle in the wardrobe. Alina's eccentricity and her tendency to see the world through her own lens made her feel that social hierarchies were far beyond her comprehension than she would have liked. It wasn't just the extravagance, but also the fact that some of her ideas could harm the environment, which worried both the Duke herself and those around her. He figured she'd probably stick to her usual pattern. One outfit for each new design, carefully choosing details and shades. But the Duke insisted that all the colors should be used together. White, gold, black dots, and a rainbow of shades, to make the design look truly complete. There were about 10 shades, and the lady tried to convince me that this was not a good idea, since a palette that was too bright could overwhelm the overall look of the outfit. However, the idea was that there would be a suitable color for every design, and if he followed her directions, the end result would be impressive and harmonious. He tried to explain to Alina that a certain degree of extravagance is a key feature of a true Socrates, and without it, creativity loses its power and originality. After these words, Alina thought about it, and she was interested in the question. Is it possible to preserve Andre's face without abandoning common sense and balance in design? And then she began to think about a plan of action that would allow her to combine individuality, elegance, and practicality in each new look. As a result, she decided to take extravagance to the next level, offering a technique that would look unusual, but still be appropriate and thoughtful. Alina developed an aristocratic approach, where the luxury of an outfit was determined not by the number of options, but by attention to detail and the uniqueness of the material. When the gentleman heard about this idea, his interest was immediately aroused, because it was an approach that was different from the usual and promised new possibilities in fashion. She proposed creating outfits for aristocrats who should wear things that were different from mass production, with special care and individuality. Instead of a multitude of options, he had to create one outfit filled with soul and special meaning, where every detail has its own significance and uniqueness. For example, he could use a completely new material that had never been produced before, making the clothing truly unique and innovative. Or the gem could be broken into tiny fragments and woven into fabric, creating a unique sparkle and effect previously unseen in fashion. The material could be coated with gold plating or something similar to give the outfit a chic, expensive look and emphasize the exclusivity of each piece. This approach transformed the outfit into something completely new for the fashion world, combining extravagance, craftsmanship, and individual style, drawing attention to every detail. He acknowledged that it was a brilliant decision, noting that Alina had demonstrated a refined taste and incredible ingenuity that could breathe life into any fashion project. Then Alina, Duke of the North, finally realized that what was happening was real, and her heart sank as she realized the scale of the situation, which required complete dedication and determination. He noted that any attempt to implement the plan would require considerable resources from the master, and this warning sounded like a quiet but stern instruction before starting work. The Duke declared that he was indeed prepared to pay all the costs to make the project happen, and his confidence in this gave strength and determination to all involved. He simply produced gold and precious stones sufficient to cover all expenses, and this immediately showed the seriousness of his intentions. The rest would be left to the tailor, who would have to create 100 variations in 20 days, a task that seemed almost impossible, but required complete concentration. Alina said that if the work turns out to be too difficult, he should immediately communicate this so as not to delay solving problems and prevent breakdowns. The Duke simply called for a servant with money and jewels, handing them over to the tailor to ensure his work, and demonstrating that he was ready to act without delay. He also asked that some of the gold be given to the tailor in advance so that he could begin work immediately and not waste time on organizational issues. When the tailor saw this, Alina's eyes lit up with surprise and admiration because she felt the seriousness of the approach and the luxury that surrounded the process. He said that was enough to get started, and her heart calmed a little, knowing that everything was going according to plan and the resources were secured. Alina Duke decided to agree to the proposed conditions, realizing that this was an opportunity that could not be missed, and that the responsibility lay with her. They simply seemed crazy, making decisions and acting so quickly. But there was a certain passion and determination in it that was both fascinating and frightening at the same time. She was not used to this world, where everything moved at such speed and required an instant reaction, and each new step seemed like a test of her strength and endurance. Janet came to the Duke to report on Alina's early progress, and her visit was a sign that the learning process was strictly controlled and important to everyone. He asked how Irina's first training had gone, trying to assess Alina's abilities and understand how quickly she grasped the material and adapted. Things turned out to be so bad that the Duke couldn't even find a way to improve the situation immediately, and Alina was a little worried and confused about it. The woman said that Alina was simply a genius, and this was obvious, considering that she had never studied etiquette before, but quickly grasped all the intricacies of the process. She had no basic knowledge or developed body language, but she instantly grasped all the complexities and subtleties that the teachers tried to explain. Amazing, everyone. Alina didn't understand why there were two of them, since she and the Duke had planned to study together with their daughter, and this added a slight confusion and doubt to her thoughts. The woman said that this would happen later, after Alina had mastered basic skills, so that the training would proceed gradually and would not overwhelm her at once. There was a feeling of complete condemnation in the atmosphere, and Alina didn't understand why they were looking at her in that way, as if judging her every movement and every emotion. She didn't expect that this lady would become her teacher, and the sudden meeting with her mentor caused a mixture of respect, excitement, and a slight fear of the new stage. The woman was the Duke's second daughter and said she was confident in her ability to teach Alina good manners, preparing to show both strictness and patience. She believed that it was easier to block Alina's mistakes than to openly flaunt them, and her method was designed to teach without unnecessary humiliation. The woman emphasized that Alina must know her place and boundaries in order to adapt to the world of nobility, and learn to conduct herself with dignity and respect. The realization of this strictness made Alina feel that there was a difficult path ahead, where she would have to show patience, attentiveness, and the ability to learn everything quickly. Alina thought she could handle the task without any difficulty, so the Duchess tensed up more than usual, fearing that she might try to figure it all out herself. The woman considered whether to make the task more difficult for Alina, or change the order of the training to test her abilities and patience. In another thought, she imagined how she could make Alina disappear without a trace. The excitement of this idea pleasantly tickled her long-extinguished emotions. She was an experienced actress and had lived many lives without real feelings, so etiquette lessons came to her with surprising ease, almost like a game. Alina asked to be shown everything she needed to learn just once, hoping that this would be enough to remember and understand the material. The woman objected, believing that once would not be enough, and said that the training would not be easy, even if it seemed easy on the outside. She doubted that Lilinka would be able to absorb everything in one go, realizing that the material was too voluminous to be mastered quickly. Alina confidently replied that she was capable of this and would not have claimed otherwise if she had not been completely confident in her abilities. The woman finally agreed and decided to show everything as Alina requested, but reserved the right to control the process at every step. However, she warned that if Alina was unable to reproduce what she saw properly, the consequences would be serious and tangible. If she makes a mistake, Alina will have to pay for the lost time of the estate's head maid, taking full responsibility for her mistakes. Alina did not object and expressed her agreement with the conditions, prepared for strict control and possible tests during the training process. The woman, as requested, showed Alina each movement only once, carefully demonstrating all the nuances and details. There were more than 50 actions, and the Duchess could not believe that Alina was able to learn all of this so quickly and accurately. Her posture, the rhythm of her breathing, the position of her hands. She radiated elegance from head to toe, as if every movement had been thought out in advance. Even the smallest details, which had not yet been taught, Alina carried out flawlessly, leaving the woman with no opportunity to find fault with anything. Her behavior was worthy of royalty, and every manner looked flawless and natural at the same time. The woman was shocked and didn't even know how to comment on what was happening. She admitted that everything was perfect and flawless. Alina repeated everything so precisely that those around her didn't even notice how difficult the work was. Her skill was bordering on perfection. The Duchess began to doubt who Alina claimed to be, seeing in her incredible skill and self-control that exceeded expectations. But the woman convinced herself that this was not a pretense, and that her student really did possess exceptional abilities worthy of respect. She claimed that everything about the body was important and true, and her words convinced that her perception was indeed correct. He took his training very seriously, believing that it was worth preparing in advance so that he would be fully prepared in case of any circumstances. After finishing his business, he sent the maid away, vacating the room and directed his gaze out the window, watching what was happening outside. Down below, he noticed Alina walking with the maids in a neatly organized group, her every movement exuding confidence and grace. Alina was distinguished by her ability to master in one day the most complex rules of metropolitan etiquette, which remained a mystery to most for weeks. He thought about the recent argument and realized that he would most likely lose in this situation, although he tried to keep it to himself. He was genuinely curious about what she would demand of him, as her desires were rarely predictable or trivial. The maids felt joy and surprise at the same time, watching their mistress, and they were pleased to feel her attention and approval. They promptly brought her tea, carefully arranging the cups and carefully ensuring that everything suited her habits and taste. People claimed that the lady was truly beautiful, and this explained why the Duke felt a mixture of admiration and submission before her. Although many of the servants disliked her for the same reasons, the maid observed everything with particular attention, evaluating every connection and action. She came to be with Alina, although she came from a family from which no benefit could be expected. But for her, it did not matter. The question arose as to what she was really trying to achieve, and whether it was worth trying to bring her to light and reveal her hidden intentions. She declared that all the servants except the head maid liked her, and promised not to leave her alone if she dared to disgrace part of the family, accompanying her words with a look. Married people kept a close eye on the servants for a long time, making sure no one dared to disturb the order, and constantly grumbled, monitoring discipline. Even she couldn't understand how the previous duchess had endured all these difficulties, considering that her mistress came from a conscious family and always felt like she was lacking something. It was said that the head maid strictly followed the captain's instructions and punished for the slightest mistakes, maintaining strict order among the servants. She even got hit once for her constant grumbling, showing that discipline was strictly enforced and breaking the rules was not forgiven. There was no one in this house who could escape Madame Janet's nagging. Her attention to detail and strict demands encompassed everything and everyone. If the lordship had taken care of the previous duchess himself, the situation might have turned out differently. But the events ended sadly and left behind only regrets. Alina was a talkative and curious person, whether it was an innate quality or a habit, but she certainly knew how to chat, and no one could surpass her in this, especially in moments when curiosity got the better of her. She still had a lot to learn, so she decided to keep someone close who could help her sort out the details, not letting the information slip away until she understood the essence of what was happening. Alina noted that she and the others were the same age and showed interest in the maid, asking her name as if trying to establish closer contact with her and understand the girl's character. The girl's name was Juna, and she was clearly delighted at the opportunity to serve Alina. Her eyes shone with devotion, and her modest smile betrayed a sincere desire to help and be useful in her new surroundings. Alina asked Juna not to find this strange, but at the same time admitted that some things still bothered her, and she hoped for the maid's attentive attitude without causing her bewilderment. She said that there were rumors that a person could be harmed or killed if he was too upstart or showed excessive greed, and these words haunted her, causing anxiety. So Alina decided to discuss this with Juna in person, hoping to get advice and understand how true such warnings were, so as not to make a mistake based on rumors. The maid warned them not to share these conversations with anyone, not even Madame Genet or his lordship, as such stories were best kept between themselves to avoid unnecessary attention. She confessed that about a month ago, the future bride and his lordship committed suicide in their home in the capital, and this event left a deep mark among those who were close to the family and service. The lady was amazed that the Duke was associated with such a bride, and surprise flashed in her eyes, because for her it seemed unexpected and contradictory in relation to known events. But Juna clarified that this woman was only a pretender, not an official spouse, and therefore a true intimacy between them did not have time to develop, despite the rumors and speculations of others. The maid added that this pretender had appeared before the engagement ceremony, so there was nothing between her and the Duke, and the rumors only inflated the impression of a possible connection that in fact did not exist. Juna noted that she had personally seen this girl among the maids sent to the capital, and could judge her behavior and character, since she had observed her closely and knew how she behaved among people. She said that the girl was sullen, hardly spoke. Her face was always gloomy and serious, and this impression was created even in those who met her only briefly, but this was enough to assess her character. Some thought she was quiet and calm, as if she were lost in her thoughts. Others thought she was gloomy and sullen, as if her mood did not allow her to show joy. And this division of impressions carried an interesting contradiction. These qualities were similar to each other, but at the same time opposite. Internal restraint was combined with external coldness, creating the image of a complex and unpredictable personality that was difficult to clearly understand. The lady noticed that it seemed that the maid Juna did not particularly like this girl, and this feeling arose even before the conversation moved on to details, as if her intuition told her about the difference in their characters. Juna explained that the reason for such hostility was that the girl with the stripe was often in the capital, and her presence caused the maid a feeling of irritation and hidden envy. Although outwardly everything looked calm, Mrs. Alina felt very tired. The day had been extremely busy, and every moment was filled with events and discoveries that required her full concentration and energy, leaving her barely able to contain her emotions. She knew the classes weren't easy, but she assured herself that even under those conditions, she was being taught the basics. For example, how to breathe correctly, which helped her stay calm and in control in any situation. He noted that she had praised Alina more than once, emphasizing her efforts and accuracy, as if wanting to show everyone that she appreciated her work and dedication. Alina, hearing this, became angry because in her opinion there was no praise, and it sounded like an unfair accusation of something she did not do. She was struck by the fact that the maid behaved differently in front of the master than usual, and this seemed strange and incomprehensible against the background of the servant's previous behavior. But this did not stop Alina from remaining strict and demanding of those around her, because discipline was her usual way of maintaining order. According to the maid, Jonah, Madame often watched Alina's every step and almost constantly reproached her, as if deliberately testing her patience. It was even said that she once received a slap in the face, but in reality these were harsh instructions, allowed only to the head maid on special occasions. However, the Duke understood that it was necessary to look at what was happening from a different angle, so as not to miss important details and hidden motives. He asked what kind of look Alina was talking about and what she wanted to convey with it, wanting to hear the full explanation. Alina reminded him that according to their agreement, she would have to return to her world, so it was important that he listen to her words. She believed that if she remembered everything she had gone through, she would be able to reconsider individual details of what happened. As for Ariel, she could have actually decided to take this step herself and driven herself to suicide, unable to withstand the pressure. Alina apologized for bringing up this difficult topic again, but admitted that the truth was vitally important here. She added that if something went wrong, it would only be a blow to the Duke's pride. But for her, it would mean the impossibility of returning home. He replied that he understood her, but asked her to clarify why she was convinced that it was not murder, but only a different outcome. Alina noted that the enemy appears when he is least expected and offered to tell in detail what exactly happened. Fortunately, the Duke did not show anger, which meant that he was even prepared to part with Madame Jeanne if he considered her useless. Alina suggested imagining that she had actually decided to end her life and that no one was putting pressure on her except her thoughts. She was sure that in that case, it could not be regarded as murder, but only as the tragic choice of the woman herself. The Duke thought deeply, realizing that it was not easy to discuss such things, since every little detail could be decisive. If the suspect refuses to admit guilt, they could vanish without a trace, leaving only speculation. But if, on the contrary, they admit murder, the consequences will be inevitable and dangerous. We will have to act together with someone who usually does not interfere, whose hands are clean of blood, but whose support can now be decisive in a difficult situation. A man in the position of a duke who takes revenge on his enemy leaves behind both destruction and creation, for his actions affect both others and his own legacy. He understands that admitting to murder could lead to a conflict that could escalate into war, and that is why he approaches it with extreme caution, evaluating every step. Alina listed those who had robbed her of the will to fight, showing that the past had left deep marks, and now she could no longer act without looking back at past wounds. Both the Duchess and his entourage carefully planned their actions throughout the week, considering the consequences of each decision and trying to maintain control of the situation. He assumed that John was among the participants, but Alina confirmed this, and added that her point of view on events was formed based on personal experience and observations. Having never lived in their circumstances, he found it difficult to understand the feelings of others. Alina, on the other hand, wondered how much other people's opinions had ever influenced her decisions and judgments. She had once been threatened by a man who had promised to throw her out of the estate if she did not show due respect, and this feeling of threat had left a long-lasting trace of fear and caution in her soul. The Duke's power was evident even when others forgot him. But Alina knew that Ariel did not have such influence, and this greatly differentiated the positions of these people in society. The duchy wielded considerable power, capable of influencing the destinies of people. But from the Duke's point of view, his opinion was decisive, and the strength of society only emphasized his authority. Every unnecessary word could cause a scandal, and Alina lived in constant fear that the slightest mistake would lead to expulsion from the estate and damage to her family's reputation. If she committed a misdemeanor, she would be considered a disgrace to the family's honor, and this sense of responsibility weighed on her, creating a constant feeling of anxiety and caution. A person excluded from society can do whatever they want to themselves. Alina knew this feeling from personal experience. When other people's words turn you into an outcast, leaving you feeling lonely and hurt, her career was destroyed by rumors that had no basis, but were powerful enough to shake the public's trust and respect for her, leaving deep wounds on her reputation. The situation worsened due to circumstances beyond her control. The repetition of similar events caused her to gradually lose her mind, as the hopelessness and pressure from society became unbearable. Ariel was unable to cope with this test. Her thoughts were confused, and her heart was squeezed with anxiety and misunderstanding of what was happening around her. She thought for a long time, remembering meetings with friends, trying to understand whether there was someone next to him who could support her in the most difficult moments of her life. It was then that she felt the Duke's attentive gaze on her, who was studying her with some strange interest, as if he wanted to understand something in her behavior. He suddenly asked her a difficult question concerning what words could lead a person to the thought of voluntarily leaving this world. Alina replied that he wasn't her, that everything was different for her, and it was important to take into account her constant fear of ending up on the sidelines of life, of losing the meaning of existence. The Duke said that he would not take this into account, recalling that the order and the deal with the duchy were just a formality for him and nothing more. He simply handed over the money, remained in the shadows, and preferred to remain inconspicuous, while the Duchess acted completely differently, more openly. Alina remembered the maid's words about the woman who, according to her rumors, slept with many men in the capital, not considering it necessary to hide her connections. She mentioned that the woman had become so carried away by promiscuous relationships that there was no longer a single man left in the capital whom she had not touched. He couldn't understand why this was causing so much condemnation, because in his opinion, many people live this way and don't consider it anything bad. And indeed, there was nothing unusual about this, except that there were a couple of unpleasant rumors about her that people readily told each other. Alina said again that she had already spoken about this, and would repeat it again. He sees the situation this way only because he perceives it in his own way, without taking into account the pain of others. For some people, she explained, when no one is happy to see you and you run into problems everywhere, life becomes an endless ordeal. As a result, no matter how hard you try, you end up abandoned even by your own family, becoming an outcast with nowhere to turn for support. And then you realize that you really have nowhere to go, because even the closest people have turned away and only emptiness remains. At such moments, it seems that it is better to die than to continue to exist in this hopelessness, where there is no warmth, no hope, no support. After this, she suddenly noticed that the Duke was again looking at her in a special way, with an incomprehensible mixture of regret and hidden anxiety. He still kept his eyes on her because she suddenly stood up on the sofa, as if demonstrating independence and a little audacity, which made him surprised and wonder about her courage. She apologized immediately, sensing she'd gotten too worked up. Her words were filled with emotion, but she tried to convey sincerity, trying to ease the tension and avoid escalating the situation. Emotions overwhelmed her, and she realized she needed to pull herself together. Her attempt to calm down became an internal struggle, reflected in her gaze and movements, full of nervous caution. He walked up to her, took control of the situation, and gently sat her down on the sofa, as if to show that everything was now under control, and that her safety and comfort were important to him at this moment. The rumors circulating around him seemed insignificant to him. Whether true or false, all this talk couldn't change what he saw with his own eyes, and what mattered to their relationship. He didn't care how others perceived her or their interactions. She had to learn to ignore others' words and rely solely on her own understanding of the situation and his actions. She had to remember a simple truth. If she didn't decide to leave herself, if she didn't take control into her own hands, then much would remain unchanged, and no one could take this step for her. The contract remained an obligation that could not be broken at will. No one intended to break it, and she had to accept this fact, understanding that leaving would not be an easy decision. Alina was in complete shock. A feeling of confusion overwhelmed her as she realized how unexpectedly events could unfold and how little she had understood the Duke up until that moment. She hadn't even suspected the Duke was capable of such behavior. His decisiveness and directness evoked in her a mixture of fear and surprise, forcing her to reconsider her previous assumptions. He made it clear that regardless of the circumstances, she should not have romantic relationships with other men while they were committed, which emphasized the seriousness of his position and expectations. As long as their relationship remains within certain boundaries, she must follow only the established rules, without giving in to personal desires and emotions that could disrupt their order. Razorin announced her plans to leave and suggested meeting Elisa. This added a sense of urgency and, at the same time, an opportunity to spend time with a loved one before parting. Fional expressed delight that His Excellency had personally come to see her off. This display of care and attention touched her heart and heightened her sense of the significance of the moment. Fionalia was deeply touched by His Highness's graciousness. Her perception of the situation was filled with respect and gratitude, a sense of being valued and respected at the highest level. He explained that he was just taking a stroll and had stumbled upon this place by chance. Since she knew Serena's men would soon be heading to the capital, this gave her the opportunity to prepare while remaining within the plan and circumstances. After all the explanations, they said goodbye, as if confirming the end of the meeting and respecting each other's personal space, leaving a slight feeling of warmth and calm after the conversation. Alina smiled sarcastically at Lady Rosalind, showing subtle irony and her inner attitude to the situation, demonstrating independence of thought and a slight mocking mood towards those present. Rosaline smiled back, sensing the Duke's presence nearby. Her gaze expressed quiet approval and joy at the close proximity they shared, sharing the gentle warmth of the moment. She noted that their paths might cross in the capital. Her voice was calm and confident, as if the anticipation of a future meeting inspired her thoughts and gave her a feeling of slight hope for a quick reunion. Afterwards, she turned to the coachman, indicating that it was time for them to depart. Her movements were determined and confident, and a gentle breeze fluttered the edges of her dress, as if urging her toward the beginning of the road. Alina was left alone with the Duke. A quiet tension, mingled with a sense of anticipation, hung in the air as they walked side by side, needing no words but sensing the importance of the moment they were about to share. She approached him cautiously, trying to get closer, almost right next to him. Her movements were soft and reserved, but they conveyed a subtle determination, a desire to feel his presence and share this moment with him without rushing. Alina was in mild shock from what had happened, feeling a sense of inner turmoil. Her thoughts swirled around the threats that might await her before she reached the capital, and this sense of apprehension kept her on edge. She determinedly noted that today she would have to stay close to the Duke, as if his presence could protect her from possible trouble. Her gaze betrayed a cautious wariness and a desire for safety. Alina's joy was palpable, as they were now about to engage in a shared activity on the wheel. Her heart quickened slightly, anticipating that these minutes spent with the Duke would be especially pleasant and memorable. She felt it was unfair that she had to study alone until now. Her inner sense of balance and desire to study with someone reinforced the feeling that studying with the Duke would be far more beneficial. The maid explained that the Duke already knew a lot. This meant they would spend less time learning simple things, focusing on more complex aspects, allowing Alina to feel at ease with the learning process. She added that these activities were important even when no one was watching. The gradual habit and regularity of the actions helped reinforce the knowledge, making the learning process more natural and relaxed, even without prying eyes. The Duke noted that her teaching style was more rigorous than he expected. His observations allowed him to understand that discipline and attention to detail were key to how she imparted knowledge to the guardians. There was a difference between the etiquette she taught and the ordinary behavior typical of a lady. The Duke began to realize that her approach to teaching contained a subtle gradation of rules and norms that was difficult to replace with anything else. However, he couldn't understand why these differences were so significant. His mind tried to grasp the meaning of the subtle differences, but logic couldn't always explain why familiar things looked different in her eyes. She had no specific reason to smile, but she did so without reason. Her smile was light and natural, a reflection of her inner mood, requiring no explanation, as if simply an expression of her state of mind. Alina noted that she had no interest in the status of Duchess. Her thoughts were free from ambition and formality. She did not seek official titles and honors, preferring to appreciate the present moment and interaction with people. This slightly surprised the maid. Her gaze betrayed a hint of bewilderment, as such openness and independence from status was rare among those accustomed to valuing titles and social standing. Alina emphasized that she doesn't need to be overly taught. Even natural learners can make mistakes, and it's important that the training isn't too difficult, allowing her to gradually master the material without overburdening her mind and soul. Trying to absorb everything at once can be overwhelming. They risk losing their composure, not finding the time to breathe and enjoy the process, which is essential for maintaining balance between learning and life. Even when studying diligently, it's important to leave room for rest. Otherwise, knowledge becomes a burden, and the ability to relax and calmly perceive what's happening helps maintain balance and self-confidence. The Duke of the North said that he had already trained Alina just enough so that she could perform tasks accurately and without tarnishing their honor. Observing all the rules of palace etiquette, he knew that Alina was quick to grasp new knowledge, and he himself had learned a little of such things in his youth, when he was taught to maintain dignity and the ability to behave among the aristocracy. He thought that if he strictly instructed them, they would be able to complete their training fairly quickly, since Alina was attentive and diligent, and he himself was not used to putting things off for long. But the process turned out to be slower than he expected, and Alina gradually forgot the details, which is why everything dragged on. Although she tried and tried to keep up with his instructions, the Duke had miscalculated. After several hours of training, he was still making mistakes, getting confused in gestures and rules, which showed that even experienced aristocrats do not immediately cope with new responsibilities. Alina began to quietly laugh at his attempts and said that she was shocked by his clumsiness, although she herself understood that patience and humor would help him get used to it faster. At first glance, it might seem that all aristocrats undergo training in precisely this strict and formal manner, where mistakes are allowed, but every step is carefully checked. The maid reassured the Duke, saying that he shouldn't worry and that everything would work out with time, since he had patience and a desire to learn how to perform all the movements and gestures correctly. But it was indeed difficult for him, and the maid noticed how difficult it was for him to maintain the correct posture and reputation at the same time, despite his efforts to avoid disgrace. Alina assured him that no one would make fun of him even if he made a mistake, because his diligence and sincere desire to learn were more important than the flawless execution of every gesture. The Duke explained that he was not a fool at all, as she sometimes joked, but he simply had not yet had time to fully warm up and master all the nuances of training, and this required time and patience. When Alina added something else to the instructions, the Duke looked at her, carefully observing her reaction and realizing that every word helped him better understand the meaning of her movements and gestures. They continued to communicate quietly, almost in a whisper, but the maid watched them with surprise, not expecting that training could be accompanied by such a friendly, almost playful atmosphere between mentor and student. Alina suggested that the Duke perform the exercises in a more comfortable setting, hinting at the possibility of doing it in bed so that his movements would be freer and the learning process less formal and stressful. The Duke reprimanded her, and Alina was surprised, not understanding why the scene she had played out had caused such a reaction, since everything had happened within the framework of training and a joke. Teaching the Duke proper gestures and manners was considered a normal and natural process, as even experienced nobles sometimes need guidance to maintain their form and dignity. A woman in a strange, squid-like costume slowly approached on her hands, and the Duke used his gestures to show her how to move and behave, demonstrating the skills he had learned in class. He admitted that he couldn't figure it out and didn't fully understand how important sign language was to her, although he felt that it was something significant and serious. Taking a deep breath, he felt the difficulty in every attempt to learn even one movement. Each movement was given to him with great tension and internal resistance. After a short pause, he suggested starting all over again immediately, as if he was ready to erase previous mistakes and devote himself entirely to the learning process. He tried his best to somehow respond to her gestures, choosing movements that could at least remotely express his thoughts and emotions. And then he promised to prove to her with his body that all his attention was focused only on her, ready to show it with every cell of his being. Because of this, she felt extremely embarrassed, not expecting such a confession and such an open display of feelings on his part. She too was shocked by what he said, as if his words had sounded loud, leaving a strange but attractive excitement inside. Alina reported that sign language training could be completed, as she had now mastered all the movements and signals without difficulty, and dancing no longer interfered with the learning process. The Duke asked if Alina had ever taken dance lessons, so he could determine at what level to begin new lessons and skills. She admitted that she had not, and he said that now it was his turn to teach her everything in which he himself felt mastery and confidence. Before beginning the dance, the young man bowed as befitted people of his class, demonstrating respect and grace. This is how he greeted his partner, showing attention and care through every movement, every gesture, and look. In response, Polina, following etiquette and the situation, also bowed to him, demonstrating respect and readiness for joint action. He appreciated her answer and noted internally that everything was done correctly, and this created the right atmosphere before the start of the dance. After that, he carefully took her hand and kissed her palm, delicately showing respect and a little playfulness at the same time. When she met his gaze, she felt unexpectedly sad, and at the same time pleased, as if time had stopped at that moment. He was so handsome and harmonious that it seemed almost criminal how one could be so confident and attractive at the same time. She felt hot and awkward, unsure how to cope with her own feelings and reaction to his attention. Judging by his slight smirk, he understood everything without words, catching her every internal movement, every look and feeling as if reading her thoughts.